Welcome to the June 15, 2021 Palm Beach County Board of County Commissioners meeting and public hearing. Before we take roll call, I'll just make a quick reminder that any person making impertinent or slanderous remarks or becomes boisterous while addressing the commission shall be barred from further audience before the commission by the presiding officer unless permission to continue or again address the commission is granted by the majority vote of the commission members present. We definitely appreciate all the public comment and all the interest in today's agenda. We're delighted to have you here at the Board of County Commissioners chambers. We'll start with agenda item 1A, roll call. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernard.
Here.
Mayor Kerner.
Here.
Commissioner Marino.
Here.
Commissioner McKinley.
Here.
Commissioner Sachs. Vice Mayor. Oh. Commissioner. Vice Mayor Weinroth.
I'm present.
Commissioner Weiss.
Here.
Very good. We have 6 county commissioners present in the commission chambers, and we have 1 county commissioner participating telephonically or
Move to approve her participation due to circumstances involving COVID.
Vice Mayor Weinroth has moved a motion forward on agenda item or the rules relating to Rule 8A relating to commissioner attendance by telephone. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Vice Mayor Weinroth, seconded by Commissioner Weiss. Is there any public comment by members of the board? All in favor? All opposed? That motion passes 6-0. Commissioner Sachs will be able to fully participate remotely from this portion forward in the agenda. We'll move now to 1B, which will be a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner McKinley. If you all please rise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge there are tragic events that happen in our community every day and impact families. The events surrounding the shooting, the gunning down of an innocent 1-year-old and his 69-year-old grandmother on Thursday at the public shopping plaza in my district. There's a couple of things I'd like to acknowledge. First, I'd like to offer a moment of silence for the victims and for their families. I'd also like to offer that moment of silence for all of the employees of that public shopping plaza and to all of the customers and all of the neighbors that were in the store that had to witness such a horrific crime. I'd also like to offer this moment of silence to our first responders and our law enforcement personnel who day in and day out have to respond to gruesome scenes such as what they witnessed on Thursday and then go home to their families. I pray that the men and women of those first responders seek the professional help if they so desire, that the employees and that the customers and that the neighbors in the Royal Palm Beach area that were witness to that event seek the help that they desire. To our staff and to our employees that offer those services and to our nonprofits in this community that offer those services, I thank them. But at this time, I'd like us to bow our heads in memory of that beautiful little baby and his grandmother and pray for them and for their families. Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McKinley, for those very moving words at a very tragic and troubling time in our community. We'll move now to agenda item 2A, additions, deletions, and substitutions. Madam Administrator, you're recognized.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, on page 16, item 3E2 has the revised motion. The amendment number was corrected. On page 48, 3P1 was deleted for further staff review. On page 59, 4B2 has a revised summary, deleting information, the last half of the last sentence, because it's accounted for in another ordinance. Page 66, 5B4 is an add-on, and this deals with direction from the board on bringing back a resolution to the board regarding the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. On page 72, 5G2 is a add-on and revised motion, and this is also a resolution the board directed us to bring back regarding Family Day. Page 73, 6A1, a revised motion adding Commissioner Weinroth to 2 nominations. Page 76, District 2, an add-on proclamation. Also 76, page 4, add-on proclamation, and page 77, a deleted proclamation. That concludes the add and delete substitution.
Mayor, I move to adopt the agenda as amended.
Very good. Just for clarification, on page 66, 5B4 is an add-on.
5B4 is, yes,
And
that
then
is an add-on.
5G2 is a revised motion and an add-on, or just?
That is correct.
Very good. Vice Mayor Weinroth has moved the adoption of the agenda as amended forward. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion by Vice Mayor Weinroth and seconded by Commissioner Marino. There's no comments by members of the board. All in favor, all opposed. The agenda has been adopted as amended. We'll move now to consent agenda, which will be found on pages 10 through 55. Let me just make sure there's no comment cards on the consent agenda. I don't believe I saw any. Very good.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the consent agenda.
Vice Mayor Weinroth has moved the consent agenda forward. Commissioner McKinley, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. I'll second that for discussion. I just wanted to highlight item 3C5 and thank staff for continuing to recognize the importance of paving and remilling our rural roads to help our agricultural community move product on and off the field. This is for Hatton Highway for 2 miles, 2 lanes, 4 miles total repaving, and that'll keep those produce trucks from cracking on the muck road, so appreciate that.
Very good. The motion has been made by Vice Mayor Weinroth and seconded by Commissioner McKinley. Would any commissioner like to pull any item from the consent agenda prior to the vote? No further comments by members of the board. All in favor? All opposed? The consent agenda passes 7-0. We'll move now to agenda item 4, public hearings, found on pages 56 through 61. Oh, you recognize Commissioner Weiss. My apologies.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out on page 15, 3E1, and this was a program that FPL provided to our community, and over $2 million of assistance for people struggling with their utility bills. And appreciate their commitment and assistance to our economically disadvantaged households.
Absolutely, and if I understand correctly, FPL seeks donations from the private community, from their employees as well, and then also from their corporate structure, which we're deeply appreciative.
And they, in the last 5 years, they've assisted over 2,300 families in Palm Beach County. So I just wanted to recognize that.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Weiss, and we're very thankful for FPL's assistance to our community and the private community that has assisted as well. That concludes the consent agenda. On agenda item 4A1, relating to public hearings, secondary service provider emergency medical certificates of public convenience and necessity.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to receive and file proof of publication.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner McKinley, seconded by Vice Mayor Weinroth, to receive and file a proof of publication. All in favor? All opposed? That item passes 7-0. Good morning, Todd. Good morning, Stephanie and team. We have with us Assistant County Administrator Todd Von Lehren and also the Director of Public Safety, Stephanie Shanaha, and Mary Blakeney, Director of Emergency Management, and other members of the team. You're recognized.
Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Want to thank Administrator Virginia Baker for my new assignment as her administrative liaison to public safety, and happy to be here on my first day of that. I'll reserve judgment till after this item whether I continue to be excited about that? No, I'm kidding. But we are very excited here today to present to you a lot of work I know went into this item by the team that's before you, as well as by former Deputy County Administrator John Van Artem. And with that, I would turn it over to Stephanie to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Todd. Just to recognize a few other members at the table, as you know, our county attorney's office has been a significant part of this process. Sharon Burrows, thank you so much for your help. And also we have Lynette Schurter. She is our EMS specialist. So just wanted to thank the team. And I'd also like just to give a shout out to John. I know he's watching today, but he was an instrumental part of this process as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. So today's agenda includes the following: secondary service provider COPCN application process, the survey and findings that was conducted, the current secondary COPCN service provider data, the secondary COPCN service provider applicants, my report, my summary report and recommendations, the hospital response and additional data gathering that was conducted, as well as the EMS Council's recommendation. So the EMS ordinance outlines responsibilities of the county administrator, which includes, but is not limited to, presentations to the EMS Council and making recommendations on the COPCN applications. This county administrator delegated that authority to me for purposes of the EMS ordinance requirements. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the board for allowing us additional time for this application process. As you know, you extended the current COPCN until June 30th of this year. Your support was much appreciated. With that additional time, we took advantage of surveying the users of secondary service providers and conducted industry research to determine the need for the proposed service offered by the applicants, which we will go into later. We also added additional information to the application review process to ensure we have the most accurate information available to make a recommendation to our board. So a little bit of background on this process. Pursuant to Florida Statutes Chapter 401, in order for the state to license an applicant to provide EMS services, an applicant must obtain a certificate of public convenience and necessity, which throughout this presentation I'll refer to as COPCN, from the county in which the applicant will operate. A COPCN is a certificate deeming it to be in the public convenience and necessity for an EMS provider to operate within the confines of the county, as authorized in Florida Statute Chapter or Section 401.25. The Palm Beach County Emergency Medical Services Ordinance provides standards for issuing COPCNs in accordance with state guidelines. The secondary service provider COPCN holders provide secondary advanced life support transports, services, and advanced life support and basic life support interfacility transport services. The majority of the services provided by a secondary provider is your interfacility transports between your hospitals and your assisted living facilities and nursing homes to and from. Advanced life support services require a higher level of medical monitoring and include IV drips, chronic ventilator, or cardiac monitoring. BLS transport services require a lesser level of medical monitoring and include transports of medical and surgical patients not requiring cardiac monitoring or discharges to home or other facilities, such as your nursing homes, your rehabs, and your assisted living facilities. The application for the secondary service provider COPCNs are issued every 6 years, and the current service providers COPCNs with AMR and Medics expire June 30th of 2021. I just also want to highlight there are other application processes within our EMS ordinance. There are two other types. There's a primary, which is what is issued to our county and municipal fire departments, is when a call is made to 911, they're to respond and decide whether they need to transport or not that patient. And then there's also special secondary COPCNs, which are specific to gated communities, and they have a contract with the Gated Community Homeowners Association. They do not transport, and they provide ALS and BLS services until the Fire Rescue Unit agency responds to transport. So just to give you a little overview of the application timeline, we started this process back in March 12th. That was pursuant to our ordinance. We're required to publicly notice the application. The ordinance allows 120 days prior to the expiration of the current COPCN providers. We accepted the applications through April, and we conducted our review until May 11th. We provided an administrator's summary report to the EMS Council on May 12th. The EMS Council met on May 13th, and we requested a recommendation on the applications that are being provided to you today. And of course, today is the meeting that this is all taking place. So pursuant to the EMS ordinance, my responsibilities include the following. To review the applications and obtain verification applicant has met all requirements of federal, state, and local laws. I'm to confirm there are no outstanding complaints against the existing providers. I'm to consider the need for the proposed service. I am to prepare and present a report with recommendation for the EMS Council's review. At the EMS Council, I'm to request their recommendation on the applications to be provided to the Board of County Commissioners, and then responsibility, of course, scheduling today's meeting. So the Emergency Medical Services Council was created in 1973 by the Board of County Commissioners and provides recommendations for improving emergency medical services in Palm Beach County. The council consists of 20 members, which includes the following: the Fire Chiefs Association of Palm Beach County, one Emergency Room Nurses Forum, one member from the private ambulance provider. However, that was represented by AMR, and AMR resigned May 12th, the day before the council meeting. It also has a Palm Beach County Healthcare District Trauma District representative, and they abstained from voting at the EMS council meeting on May 13th due to conflict of submitting an application. It also has a representative from the Palm Beach County Emergency Medical Service Provider, a member from the Economic Council of Palm Beach County, one emergency room physician, one EMS educator, 7 consumer districts, one Palm Beach County Emergency Medical Directors Association, one Palm Beach County firefighters, paramedics, and 3 hospital CEOs. These hospital CEOs each represent the 3 types of hospitals in Palm Beach County, which are your independent, your HCA, and your tenant. So pursuant to the EMS ordinance, the EMS Council's responsibility are to review my report on all the application. They received a 10-minute presentation from each of the applicants, except for rapid response medical transportation. They had an opportunity to ask questions after the administrator's report and presentation, and a final vote was held by the council members to approve or deny each applicant. So today's meeting, all of the applicants were notified of the date, time, and place of today's meeting, and that they could provide public comment for 3 minutes. Today, I will provide you with a report of all the applicants, the recommendation to the EMS Council, the recommendation of the EMS Council, and other relevant documentation to assist you in making a decision today. The staff will be requesting the board to approve or deny the COPCN application at today's meeting. So pursuant to the EMS ordinance, the administrator's review shall include consideration of the need for the proposed service. Therefore, we conducted a survey on the users of the secondary provider ALS/BLS transport services. Details and charts associated with this data can be found in the supplemental package that was part of the agenda item package. The survey introduction stated the following: the secondary service provider of the COPCN with American Medical Response and Medical Ambulance Service to provide secondary ALS and BLS interfacility transfer services in Palm Beach County expires June 30th of 2021. Per the EMS ordinance, a COPCN is defined as deeming it to be the public convenience and necessity for providers to operate within Palm Beach County. Furthermore, the EMS Council's responsibility is to advise and provide recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners on the issuance of COPCNs. Therefore, the county staff is gathering relevant information for the EMS Council to assist them in making a recommendation to the board. The county staff put together a survey to gather this information. All of the users that were sent this survey had that outlined in the request. The survey was sent to 260 assisted living facilities and nursing homes and 15 hospitals. A total of 303 emails were originally sent. The survey was open from December 14th through January 15th, and 2 reminders to fill out the survey were sent to all contacts. We received a total of 60 responses. The survey findings for the 60 respondents were as follows. When asked if the users wanted more ambulance providers, 60% said no and 40% said yes. When asked if their private ambulance needs were being met, 54 or 30 said sometimes, 46% or 24 said always, and 4% or 2 are never met. Of the 30 that responded their needs were sometimes met and 2 were never met, when asked if they want more providers, 11 did not want more providers. When asked if the users want to replace their current provider with a different provider, 72% or 38 said unlikely, and 28% or 15 said likely. When asked for average response times for the month of January 2020, there were 24 respondents, of which 50% or 12 of those were within the 15-minute response time compliance rate per the EMS ordinance, and the other half were not. However, when respondents were asked for additional data to support their response, none was provided, and we did 2 follow-ups to that. request. Based on the initial survey findings, the majority of the users do not want more ambulance providers. Some needs may not always be met, but still do not want to replace or have more ambulance providers. Survey response explanations for the needs not being met use the term non-emergency medical transports, which is not an ALS or BLS transport. NEMTs are wheelchair and stretcher transportation for someone that cannot be transported by a common carrier. It should be noted that AMR and medics do provide this service. However, NEMTs are not regulated under the EMS ordinance. NEMTs are regulated under a separate ordinance called the Vehicle for Hire Ordinance, which does not have any response time requirements. Having said that, we found that the staff is putting together an education outreach campaign to the industry users of EMS and NEMT services to ensure they know who and when to call for these services in Palm Beach County. Another part of our review process for this application included gathering information on the current service providers, AMR and medics, response times, which is a requirement of the EMS ordinance and was used in the administrator's initial review for consideration of need. The details and charts associated with this data can be found in the supplemental package that was part of the agenda item. Pursuant to the EMS ordinance, secondary COPCN providers must be at the requesting facility within 15 minutes of the agreed scheduled time and maintain an average of 90% compliance rate each month. A review of the data provided by the current provider over the last 2 years found the following. AMR mainly showed a 90% compliance rate over 2 years for inter-facility transfers with the exception of the period of the pandemic. Medics mainly showed a 91% compliance rate over 2 years for inter-facility transfers with the exception of the period of the pandemic. Also referenced in the EMS ordinance, if the patient is not ready for transport within 30 minutes of arrival of the responding unit may leave the requesting facility. 55% of requests from the facilities, the patient was not ready for transport within 30 minutes of AMR's arrival and AMR had to wait. 53% requests from the facilities, the patient was not ready for transport within 30 minutes of medics' arrival and medics had to wait. Please note the EMS Council does not regulate hospitals. Now moving on to the application summary report. There were a total of 7 companies that applied for a secondary COPCN. All County Ambulance, Atlantic Palm Beach Ambulance Incorporated doing business as American Medical Response, Century Ambulance Incorporated, Healthcare District of Palm Beach County, MCT Express doing business as All County Ambulance, Medics Ambulance Service Incorporated, National Health Transport Incorporated, and Rapid Response Medical Transportation Incorporated. The secondary COPCN application included 21 requests for information, with 11 of those being requirements pursuant to the EMS ordinance as highlighted in blue in this chart. The next few slides will provide a summary report on a few of the application areas. All applicants provided a statement of need except for AMR, medics, and rapid response medical transportation. I will highlight a few points from each statement that was provided. For All County Ambulance, they stated there needs to be more private ambulance providers due to growth trends. For Century, they stated there's an overutilization of EMS resources due to the lack of non-emergency ambulance providers. For the Healthcare District, they stated there are long wait times in Belle Glade, and the National Health Transport indicated Palm Beach County needs more non-emergency ambulance providers that have proven track records, great benefits, and diversity. This next chart provides an overview of each of the company's staff, equipment dedicated to Palm Beach County, the rate structure, and average response time, along with the number of EMS runs for the period July 2020 through December of 2020 for routine scheduled calls at requesting facilities. Based on the number of vehicles proposed for Palm Beach County, all companies, with the exception of the current providers, are looking to supplement existing services in Palm Beach County. This next chart shows the years of experience based on the applicant's response to the request for a summary history of ALS or BLS emergency services performance record to show proof of demonstrated experience providing ALS or BLS services. AMR and medics have an NA not applicable because this was not a requirement of the application for current Palm Beach County secondary COPCN holders. Based on the information submitted in the secondary provider COPCN applications, all companies were compliant with the EMS ordinance application requirements except for the following 2 companies. National Health Transport did not submit audited financial statements for the past 3 years. Audited financial statements are a significant element of the EMS ordinance application requirements to demonstrate financial ability to provide service in Palm Beach County. Also, Rapid Response Medical Transportation did not submit audited financial statements for the past 3 years, as well as they did not demonstrate or provide history of providing ALS or BLS emergency services, which again is another significant element of the application process. And their response had no substance and does not serve as a record of compliance with the statute and the Florida Administrative Code for a formal quality assurance program, which is again another significant element to the EMS ordinance application requirements. And also, their application did not include record of demonstrating an emergency medical dispatch program or agreement. Rapid Response Medical Transportation provided a two-sentence statement noting they use FirstNet as their means of communication. They state they have a dispatch center that is fully staffed and operates 24/7, but provides no record as evidence supporting a dispatch center. The response lacked substance and does not serve as a record of applicant having an EMD program and or compliance with the statute. Okay, moving on to the administrator's initial report. So pursuant to the EMS ordinance, the administrator's initial review included consideration of need for the proposed service in the requested area, which was primarily based on data collected from the current service providers for a 2-year period and the survey information gathered. With the exception of AMR and Medics, all applicants' proposed service described supplementing the county's current service provider, which was indicated in either their statement of need or by the number of vehicles they would provide to Palm Beach County. The healthcare district's proposed service would be limited to interfacility transports of only the healthcare district patients needing transports from Lakeside Medical Center, a public hospital in Belle Glade, to other healthcare district facilities and specialized treatment centers, and patients needing transports to and from the JFK North Addiction Stabilization Unit. Based on the initial survey findings, the majority of the users do not want more ambulance providers. The needs were sometimes met, but still do not want to replace or have more ambulance providers. And some users indicated delayed response times, however, did not provide data to support their response. Finally, the data provided by the current service providers, AMR and Medics, mainly showed they are able to maintain an average of 90% and 91% compliance rate for interfacility transfers each month, which is pursuant to the EMS ordinance, with the exception of the period of the pandemic. Based on the information collected through surveys, the application process, and data gathering, initially I found there was not convincing evidence there was a need for the proposed service offered by the new companies, with the exception of the healthcare district, whereby their proposed service is limited to their patients only. Therefore, my report and my initial recommendation to the EMS Council was the following: to approve secondary COPCNs to AMR, Medics, and the Healthcare District of Palm Beach County with conditions. My initial recommendation was also to deny secondary COPCNs to the following applicants due to not finding convincing evidence there was a need for the proposed service: All County Ambulance, Century, National Health Transport, and Rapid Response Medical. It should be noted that the National Health Transport and Rapid Response Medical Transportation failed to meet the application requirements outlined in the EMS ordinance, which also supported denial of their applications. Moving on to the EMS Council meeting. At that meeting on May 13th of 2021, the hospital CEO, EMS Advisory Council members expressed concerns on behalf of all of Palm Beach County 15 hospitals regarding delayed response times and the need for more providers. Therefore, we took a deeper dive into the survey response and hospital data and had further conversations with the hospital CEOs. When comparing total users of private ambulance services by type, there are 15 hospitals versus 260 assisted living facilities and nursing homes. Of the 15 hospitals that were sent the survey, 9 wanted more providers. 60% of total ambulance transports are provided to hospitals. Another request was sent to hospitals for data and input to support their concerns with the delays and their arguments. For this request, we received response time data from 5 hospitals. This chart represents the 5 hospitals that provided data to support their concerns on delayed response times from the current service providers. Boca Raton Regional provided data for the month of January 2020 2021, for a total of 489 transports, which showed a 76% on-time percentage rate. West Palm Beach Veteran Affairs provided data for the month of January 2020 for a total of 19 transports, which showed a 47% on-time percentage rate. JFK North, JFK South, and Palms West provided a random data sample of 117, which was taken from 1,709 total transports for the month of January 2021 through April of 2021, which showed a 54% on-time percentage rate. Additionally, we had discussions with the hospital CEOs for additional input and to gain a better understanding of their issues. They stated the following: AMR and Medics provides excellent customer service and the staff are friendly and pleasant. That having additional providers would drive competition. Having only one provider does not allow options for other availability. The constant delays affect their hospital throughput. Palm Beach County needing more than one ambulance provider is just like needing more than one hospital. With a growing population and healthcare system demands, an additional provider is needed for the next 6 years. Requests for transports are provided an original ETA, however, many times given an updated ETA for a later time. Current providers are not able to meet the demands of the initial requested time for transport, which is different from the final agreed upon time. In both scenarios of ETA that I just mentioned, due to the wait times, patients may decline during that time and they have no resort but to call 911. And last, hospital databases are not set up to fundamentally track private ambulance response times. So at the EMS Council meeting on May 13th, the council voted on each of the 7 applications, and the votes were as follows. AMR 17 approved, denied none. Medics 17 approved, denied none. Healthcare District of Palm Beach County 17 approved, denied none. MCT Express doing business as All County Ambulance 10 approved, 7 denied. Century Ambulance Service 8 approved, 9 denied. National Health Transport, 1 approved, 16 denied, and Rapid Response Medical Transportation, 0 approved, 17 denied. Based on the additional data gathered from the hospitals, along with the supporting arguments, all local hospital CEOs on the need for additional provider, the EMS Program Administrator supports the Council's recommendation of approving 4 secondary COPCN applications to AMR, Medics, MCT Express doing business as All County Ambulance, and the Healthcare District of Palm Beach County with conditions, which again is limited to their patients needing transports from Lakeside Medical Center to other Healthcare District facilities and specialized treatment centers, and their patients needing transports to and from the JFK North Addiction Stabilization Unit within Palm Beach County. And also denying secondary provider COPCN applications for Century Ambulance and National Health Transport and Rapid Response Medical Transportation, as referenced in the slide in the motion and title and summary of the agenda item. Before I close, I would just like to bring attention to the new legislation that was passed last night. I received several emails from commissioners, as well as discussions that were brought up during the briefings. And I think it's important to note that this legislation was just passed yesterday. As part of my review process, as you know, I had to start back in March. And the information that I was required to do as part of this application process was in accordance with our ordinance. I can tell you that we were approached by a firm called Hotzela of Palm Beach County. They are looking to do service in Palm Beach County as a special secondary COPCN provider, which is very specific to a gated community. They are not looking to transport or do any inter-facility transports. So at the time, I did not feel it was relevant information. As you know, this legislation is very new. Also, in looking at the agency that was behind this legislation is called Hotzela of South Florida, and their information is on their website that was gathered, is that they are to assess and begin life-saving treatments until official rescue units arrive to continue with more advanced care and to transport the patient to the appropriate hospital for further treatment. According to their information, they do not provide transportation to a hospital. So I don't know, again, any other company that is a nonprofit, faith-based organization that this legislation would allow to operate in any county. The legislation, again, is very limited it has certain criteria associated with it. The organization has to be a nonprofit for 10 years, and they are also limited to a number of counties that they can operate in. So I felt that was important information for the board because of several commissioners have inquired about it, and I wanted to just let you know that, again, anything is possible, but I just thought you need to understand where my position was during this process.
Thank you, Stephanie, for a very detailed and helpful presentation and administrator's recommendation. And I know that you and your team put a lot of work into it. I'm going to ask the board to confine their comments right now to questions, and then we'll hear public comments, and then we'll get into our policy debate. And I just needed one clarification on that last point, and then I'll recognize Vice Mayor Weinroth. With regards to Hatsala, and we had some good discussions about it yesterday, you made the point to ensure that as of right now and in the past, their website and their operational plan doesn't include transport to a hospital from the scene of the injury or medical condition. But with it, and I don't think we're talking about today transport from the scene to the hospital, where the COPCN contemplates interfacility transfers, really. So with the advent of the new legislation that is law now, would they be allowed to do interfacility transports?
They could change, yes. They could definitely change, I mean, based on the information that I was able to gather, just based on my research, they could change their mission. But my understanding is they're more wanting to respond to a resident that may call 911, then they're asked to call Hatsala secondary. So 911 first, and then Hatsala is to respond to the scene within 3 minutes. That's their goal. And then when the responding agency gets there, then they would take over or not, depending on. But yes, that doesn't preclude them from being able to provide a secondary service provider.
Which would include interfacility transports.
Which could include that is definitely not off the table.
Prior to the legislation being passed and into law, really it would be illegal for them to do an interfacility transport, and certainly they wouldn't want to advertise that or do those illegal acts prior to the passage of the legislation.
Correct, and the agency that submitted an application to us was very clear in their application that they would not be doing transports.
And if they wanted to do transports thereafter, once the legislation was passed, they wouldn't need to actually interact or seek approval from the Department of Public Safety or the board, correct?
Correct, because of their capacity as a nonprofit volunteer agency, and as long as they were operating within 10 years in the state of Florida.
Very good. All right, we'll move to other questions. We'll start with Vice Mayor Weinroth and then to Commissioner McKinley.
Thank you, and thank you again for a very thorough presentation. And like the mayor, I'm also focused on House Bill 805, because I think that it is a potential seismic change in the way that there's going to be transport, not only between hospital and facilities, but from a situation, a trauma that's occurred, and there's nothing from what I'm reading in the bill that's going to stop these agencies, nonprofits, not affiliated with a profit agency. So one of these companies can't just try and create a nonprofit arm to start carrying. But on the other hand, we do have the potential of more companies jumping into this arena as they view the need there. So notwithstanding the fact that this is so new, do you see the potential for additional faith-based companies entering this arena over the next 6 years to fill what may be an additional need coming up?
Again, based on the application and the discussions that we've had with the existing company that applied for a special secondary, I have not been told that they're looking to do that. So I am responsible as part of the ordinances to determine the need. That's the need right now. And there's an overwhelming response from the users, which are your hospitals and your and some assisted living facilities. And I think at that level, the user, it's their choice to work with these agencies. They have a contract, a special contract with them. And so that I can't answer at this time because I'm not the users of that service. So based on the need right now, I would still continue with my recommendation. And I am not sure if they're actually looking to work in Palm Beach County at that level of providing interfacility transports.
And again, I understand that this has just been dropped on you basically overnight, not that we didn't see the bill coming. But Hatzla is certainly not going to be the only agency that's going to look at this as a potential need and maybe bolster their mission as a nonprofit, faith-based organization. So I think that this body is going to have to take notice of the fact that whatever we do here today, whether we approve 3, 4, or how many providers, there is still the potential of other providers coming into this arena over the next 6 years. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Weinroth. We'll move to Commissioner McKinley, then to Commissioner Bernard.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Weinroth. They call that a preemption. And Representative Mike Caruso from our delegation actually sponsored that bill, and I know he wasn't really aware of any of the preemption-type concerns until late in the process, and by then it was too far along to slow that train down. So I do think that we should examine this piece of legislation carefully and maybe work with Representative Caruso's office to address any glitches in the next session if we need to. Before I begin my comments, I just want to fully disclose that I am a member of the Board of Trustees of Palms West Hospital. It's an HCA provider. They did participate in the EMS Council. I saw in the presentation that they also submitted comments. Just want to note it was never an item on any of my Board of Trustee agendas. I've had no conversations with anybody in leadership at Palms West Hospital on this issue, and I did run this through the County Attorney's Office and the Ethics Commission to see if I had a conflict. They both advised me I do not and gave me the option to disclose this on the record, so I am just disclosing it to be on the safe side. So I have a couple of questions. Stephanie, this isn't the first time that we've looked at this issue. Staff made a recommendation 6 years ago to use multiple providers. The county commission at that time opted to select one provider, or AMR and Medics, so I guess that's really 2 providers. Do you remember any of the reason why we chose to use those providers, and what's changed between that time and what we're looking at today?
So 6 years ago, on December 2nd of 2014, it was a recommendation by staff to approve a renewal of the COPCNs to AMR and Medics and approve a 6-year COPCN to American Ambulance Service. I know that there was discussion. It was very much supported by certain members of the community that having one provider is what was preferred. So I can tell you that during our process of this application, we have done more than probably we've ever done. I know I'm very new to this in my position, and we in the past have always recommended if they apply and they complete all the application requirements, that they would be submitted for recommendation. This year we took it a little different approach and worked on the identifying and determining the need for the proposed service. And as I mentioned before, the proposed service was supplementing the county's existing service. They're not looking to take over the entire county. So we took that into consideration this year, and based on our recommendation and the feedback from the hospitals, which was an overwhelming response, we identified that there was a need for an additional provider based on the information that was submitted to us. So that's the difference between what happened 6 years ago versus now.
Okay, and in your recommendation, in your chart that you showed, the recommended providers, I'm going to kind of put the healthcare district in its own silo for now. So the other 3 providers have committed a certain number of vehicles and staff to provide this service. Are there any restrictions in place that limit them to the numbers that you've presented to us today?
It is the board's desire to limit the number of vehicles that could be put as a condition on their COPCN.
Okay, but if, for instance, one of the providers is reserving 12 vehicles for Palm Beach County, we could approve that today based on that understanding, and tomorrow there could be 300.
If they are told within their COPCN and their service area and the conditions on the COPCN limit to the number of vehicles, our responsibility as the EMS office is to regulate that. So And in doing that, I would be working with the users of the service to ensure that they use a regulated vehicle, so a vehicle that is licensed through our office. And so it would be a violation of the ordinance if they were to operate more than what the COPCN authorized them to do so. Does that answer your question?
Well, yesterday you said in agenda review that there is no limit. That's just what they're presenting to you today. That's like the minimum that they commit.
Yes, correct. That is the minimum, but I thought you were asking if we were to limit them, or if there was a limit. If they say 12, but at this time, the proposal that was submitted to us through the application is that they're going to start out with 12, and then they can expand based on their increase in demand.
Okay.
So, but again, the board can choose to put a condition on any COPCN if they wish to do so.
All righty, and the sheriff has written a letter opposing staff's recommendation, and the fire union has written or expressed their concerns. Historically, the fire chief did as well, but I understand that has changed. Do you know what the reasons are for the sheriff and for the union and some other neighborhood coalitions in opposing staff's recommendation?
I do not. I do know that, my process, as you can see, was outlined and very transparent from day one. I can tell you that, we, staff and the team here, did an extensive review to help make a recommendation. I have not seen any other information that was provided by those representatives on making a determination of why or why not to add a company.
Okay, and bear with me because I wrote a lot of questions while they were doing their presentation. 6 years, the contract that we're going to approve today or the COPCNs we're approving today are for 6 years. Is that a statutory requirement or just a staff preference?
It is an ordinance requirement, a county ordinance requirement.
Okay. And then let's talk about the data gathering for a second. There are other counties that I understand that use a third party to gather the data. It seems a lot of the confusion around this item today has been, in the changing of your opinion, has been based on the lack of adequate data. So AMR medics, maybe this is a better question for them if they speak, but if do you know how they track their data, how they were able to present that information to you so clearly?
It's my understanding that they are pulling all of this information from their CAD system, so they have a dispatch system in place, but I don't want to answer on their behalf. They could probably explain it a little more, but what I've been told is they have a dispatch system, and it's a CAD system that's in place, and they're pulling it from that database. But I would prefer them answer that in any more specific questions that you have regarding that.
And do we know how the hospitals track their data?
So based on some conversations with the 5 hospitals, a lot of it's from patient records. So like I said before, many of the comments from the hospitals was they don't have a database or a system that's set up to fundamentally track this information. There's a lot of other elements associated with it. It's not just a sole dispatch system. So that is where they had to gather the information based on the patient records.
And do we know if the data
sorry.
that we received from the hospital, is it for all patient transports that were called into these service providers?
So what I had requested was for an entire month of January. I know that all the information that was provided was for an entire month or 4 months for one of the hospital, JFK North, South, and Palms West. So they did provide, in my understanding of receiving the data, again, wasn't able to audit it, but it was for an entire month.
But do we know if that was ALS, BLS transport and non-emergency medical transports? Or was
No,
that
it was just interfacility transports, ALS and BLS.
Okay.
And I did confirm that, yes.
Okay, and their system is set up to differentiate between those calls?
That's what I asked. Again, I'm not able to audit it, but I asked for that information.
Okay.
And I questioned it when it came in to make sure that it did not include non-emergency medical transports.
Okay, and then just the survey collection, or the survey that you put out, you did it from December 14th until January 15th. During the holiday season, during the midst of COVID, would it be fair to say that may have provided some of the difficulty in getting responses or may have affected the accuracy of the data?
So I can tell you that we sent out the survey during that period of time based on just the way the council meetings were scheduled, and we had to get approval from the council. Well, not necessarily approval from the council, but we thought it was appropriate to make sure that the council, the EMS council, was aware of this additional data gathering to help not only them make a recommendation, but also to make a recommendation to the board. But I do know that we sent out several reminders of filling out the survey, and we also extended it. And all of that was sent to 303 emails twice. So I felt like after the holidays, the January 1st to maybe January 7th, they still had a week to respond. So I felt that it was enough time after the holidays to provide an appropriate response.
Okay, and the January data you received from them is January 2021?
One hospital provided January 2020. The other 4 hospitals was January 2021 with another one. Can you go back to the slide? Right, oh, there. So Boca Raton Regional provided January 2021, West Palm Beach Veteran Affairs, January 2020, and then JFK North, South, and Palms West was the 4 months of 2021, January through April. My request was to try to gather data outside of the period of the pandemic. As we know, most of our issues that we're dealing with during the pandemic, created delays, even just with our county services that we're providing. So, but they were not able to gather that, and maybe the hospitals can explain further if they're here today.
All right, so I'm just looking at that and thinking to myself, that is not an apples to apples comparison. And you're looking, the current provider is getting penalized if you look at that data right there for the fact that the data is coming from pandemic months where they're being rewarded for really good service in what is a more normal atmosphere in January of 2020. I'm not sure I'm entirely comfortable with the data that's presented to us today because there were no very specific parameters given to the hospitals of what data they should submit, and you are not comparing apples to apples right there.
So if I may respond to that, we did give them specific parameters and replying with data from the month of January 2020. However, like I said before, with their system, a lot of the information, they were not able to go back that far, but we did not want to encroach on the period of the pandemic. This is all we were able to gather, but I think also, because they're not set up to fundamentally track, the overwhelming response that I received from hospitals, 15 of them, all of them are wanting more users. And I think that is something that I could not ignore. And I understand that the data does not necessarily support the argument, to the liking that I would have, but I just cannot ignore the fact that all 15 hospitals are saying that they want more providers.
Just a couple more questions, Mayor, I promise. What would it take for us to get a third-party tracking system in Palm Beach County, similar to what they have in Miami-Dade?
So they, again, we cannot regulate and mandate what the hospitals can use. I know that some of the discussions that the CEOs have presented to me, we can certainly as an office help facilitate. I know that there's certain companies out there that do that. It would just be a matter of all hospitals, buying into this system. It would be a cost impact to them. Obviously, I don't know how much the service, but there are companies out there that do this type of service.
Now, if you could get back to me on what they do in Miami-Dade County, I would appreciate that. And then the last question, the audited, actually, I have 2 questions. Audited financial statements, is that a state requirement?
That is a county ordinance requirement.
And do other counties require audited financial statements, or is Palm Beach County alone in that?
Broward County requires. I believe Miami-Dade does too, yes.
Okay. And then the last question, EMS council vote took place before you had the information from the hospitals.
Correct.
Do you know why the EMS council members voted no originally on those last providers? I mean, that 10-7 vote's pretty close, so.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that, the breakdown the votes, the 10 to 7, you know, was they wanted additional providers. You know, there was a makeup of different representatives on the EMS council that voted that group of 10. It was hospitals and non-hospitals. And I don't have any information on why the one provider that did meet all the application requirements did not get in as far as recommending approval for moving them forward. But they were denied. That's why they are recommended for denial in this process.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, thank you for your patience. I think that was every question that has been asked of me over the last 6 months on this particular item. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner McKinley, for the excellent questions, and certainly this is an intense, important issue of public safety, so every commissioner should feel free to certainly extract as much information as possible. And before I recognize Commissioner Bernard, if I could just interject 1 second. Because of the quality of your questions, Commissioner McKinley, I had 2 quick follow-ups related to it. The first one is, I've heard some different terminology about whether this is a recommendation from the council or whether it's an indication to move the application forward for consideration. It may be a distinction without impact because ultimately the board decides, but is the council voting to move the application forward for approval, or are they suggesting that by voting in favor of a company, they just simply want us to consider it at this public hearing?
Based on the application requirements of the ordinance, and let me pull my, can you go back to the slide? It's, the EMS council is to make a recommendation to the board for approval or denial of each application.
Okay.
That is what exactly they're to approve or deny each application.
Okay.
And so that is what happened during that council meeting. We went through each application.
So they're moving it forward for approval from their perspective?
Recommendation, approval,
Right.
yeah, I guess.
And certainly we understand it's not binding, and we appreciate the hard work of the council, but there was a statistic that you raised, 60%, I think, of the hospitals did not want more service.
So when we did the survey of all the users, so that was 303 emails, it was about 260 assisted living facilities and nursing homes and 15 hospitals. And that 60% was of only 60 people that filled out the survey, and the users were a mixture of hospitals and assisted living facilities.
So it contemplates hospitals, ALFs, nursing homes.
So when we looked at the data again and just focused on hospitals, 9 of those 15 hospitals said they wanted more providers.
Sure, and I appreciate that elaboration, but with regards to the issue that I'm speaking about presently, which was the collective group of those voting between ALFs, nursing homes versus hospitals, who has the broader use of the EMS system?
The hospital. You mean okay, so 60% of the transports are used by hospitals, and then also, are you asking about the council members?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm asking about if there's 1,000 trips done in the county a year, and I know that's not an accurate statement, but what percent is utilized by nursing homes, ALFs versus hospitals?
Yeah, so 40% is by ALFs and nursing homes, and then 60% is hospitals.
Okay, I think that's what was confusing me because they're both 60/40.
Sorry, I know, yeah.
That's fine. And then with regards to the data that you received from the hospitals that Commissioner McKinley
Go back to that slide.
sought information on a scale of 1 to 10, and not, take your process out of the place. You did a great job, fine process. You can only utilize the data that you're given, but on a scale of 1 to 10, or in any way that you want to shape it or describe it, what's your trust in the veracity and accuracy of that data? Given that the hospitals have already proactively said we don't have a system in place to track it.
Yeah, without me auditing any of the data, and I'll say this, we don't have the ability to audit the data of the current providers either. So just like audited financial statements, if they're not audited, it's difficult to rely. I would have to trust that an agency is going to provide the accurate data to me. So that is what I'm basing it on. I can tell you that I think we've learned a lot from this process, and that we're going to put things in our ordinance and our rules and regulations that allow us to be able to look into this further.
Okay, and then the last follow-up from Commissioner McKinley's line of questions is, how much confidence do you have in the hospital's organic understanding between the difference a vehicle for hire versus not, medical transport, ALS, BLS?
So when I spoke to the hospitals, they understood the difference between the ones that provided me the data. They understood, and again, keep in mind, the ones that I spoke to are speaking on behalf of their agencies, so your HCA, your tenants, and your independents. And they indicated that they did understand the difference between NEMTs and 911 calls and interfacility transport type services provided by AMR and medics. I think, though, that there is an issue of the actual person that's calling. I think it's from a higher level there's understanding, but I think maybe from your case manager or your person that's responsible for making contact with the dispatch, there may be some confusion on NEMTs versus private ambulance versus 911.
Okay. And I certainly would agree with that perspective, just from sitting 1,000 feet up on this. I'm not on an ambulance, but it seems like there's oftentimes confusion. There's oftentimes CAD reports that I read that they called, 911 for basic BLS transport unnecessarily, that they never bothered to contact AMR. Have you experienced that in your organic evaluation of the applications?
Yeah, I think the term, just by what we've learned, is we need to change it. I think that, it's a term that could be easily changed, because I think it's I don't want to say misused, but I think that, we could we in our office are definitely going to do a better job and help facilitate this conversation with whatever provider gets approved today, as well as with the hospitals, to make sure that, there's some system in place, like a point card or, some education campaign, like I mentioned in my presentation, that, I feel like is our county office's responsibility to do. And I just, sorry if I may add, I feel like the office has done an amazing job, Lynette and team, but we didn't know this was an issue until, just these last few months. So I feel that, when you don't know, you're not aware of something's wrong, you don't know that you need to fix it. But now that we know there's an issue, we are willing to work and fix, and bring resolution to these issues.
Absolutely. Certainly, a collateral effect of this process is that we get to refine the process moving forward. So I appreciate those candid comments. My apologies, Commissioner Bernard, you recognize, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask some questions in regards to the data collection process. I feel like you want us to approve a 6-year contract, and however, there's no way for us to really track the data. How do you come in front of us to ask us to approve a 6-year contract and there's no way to track this data? Are other people tracking data?
So based on our review of other applications within other counties, their requirements are similar to ours. They don't have audited data. And I can tell you that, through this process, we not only looked at the data, but we looked at the need of what the users in this county want of this service. And I think that, moving forward, like we said, we've been, I think, very transparent in the fact that, improvements need to be made. I'm very new to this process. This ordinance has been set in place for several years, and I've found that there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. But I think, set aside the data, your 15 hospitals is really their voice I could not ignore. And I'm not asking you to, approve or disapprove based on just voice, but the voice and the EMS council recommendation, those were two, major points of consideration when I was making the recommendation.
But if this item is so important to the hospitals, how come they're not tracking the data?
Yeah, like I said, I think that their system is just not set up to do that. I think moving forward, this is something that we will encourage our hospitals to do, to track the data, depending on which.
What if they don't want to track the data, but they want us to make decisions based on basically anecdotal evidence? If they don't want to track the data, but then they want to tell us exactly, how we should make these decisions.
Yeah. No, I agree that, again, like I said, we have no regulations over the hospitals. We can only ask to help work, out through these issues. And at this time, I can't enforce or regulate, them to do any of that data gathering.
And so I know Commissioner McKinley mentioned third-party data collection. Do you have information regarding how does that work, the third-party tracking system?
To my understanding, is that there is agencies out there that can provide a dispatch system where everything gets funneled, and they actually schedule the calls, and I guess the hospitals as well as the firms that are going to be providing the private ambulance transports would collectively work together. It would be like a tri-party agreement. And again, I don't have enough information on that, and that would be something that the hospitals would have to be willing to do. We could not. I don't believe it's in the county's position that we could regulate that, or we could require that for the hospitals.
So we cannot require them to do that. We cannot regulate, but they can make the requirement in terms of our decisions.
I think that they're just asking at this point for additional providers, and it's up to the board to make that determination of whether they think the additional providers are needed.
In regards to you had mentioned the NEMT. Do we have a number in terms of the total of NEMT calls that the hospitals sent out during the past year or two?
Yes, I believe, I don't have that data with me today, but I believe AMR and Medics have the number of NEMT transports that they provided to the hospitals.
Is there a way that can I ask AMR that? Okay, please.
Commissioner, in 2020, we ran collectively over 8,500 transports in an ambulance that should have gone paratransit.
Could you just go a little bit slower for me? So explain to me what the NEMT and how many calls and kind of like how does that work, if you don't mind?
It's actually an inappropriate usage of level of service, and it's based on a systemic misunderstanding of or lack of knowledge by the people who call and schedule those transports. NEMT is, as staff stated, a wheelchair or a non-medical stretcher call where that passenger would not require or likely require any sort of medical monitoring. There's guidelines that are set into place by the insurance companies, Medicare being the number one, that state what is medically necessary and what they'll cover and what they won't cover. And that's the gray area that exists here that I think in the future, as staff had stated, it needs to be focused on so that everybody's on the same page with that. We track that information from our CAD data, and in 2020, collectively between your current private providers, we transported over 8,500 patients in an ambulance that should have gone via a non-medical company.
Now, when you mentioned the 8,500 transports, how does that impact the response time for those NEMTs, and also how does it impact the ALS or BL services? Let me make sure I get it right. Yeah, ALS and BLS services.
Understood. Well, Commissioner, when you take an ambulance out of service to run an NEMT call, then they're not available to run an ambulance call. So it would obviously impact the service level.
Just hold on a second. Stephanie, what can we do to the NEMT? Is it an ordinance? What can we do to improve the NEMT so in that way they're not being called for the NEMT services?
So the NEMT, non-emergency medical transport, is regulated under our vehicle for hire ordinance. There's no response times associated with that, and typically it's pre-scheduled 24 hours in advance. We have about 27 companies that are licensed under the vehicle for hire ordinance. It's my understanding, just to add, AMR and Medics is also an NEMT, so they do have vehicles that provide this service. But like, Brooke said, a lot of times I think that they do a triage, is what I'm being told, of the call that comes in, and they determine whether it's, ALS or BLS or NEMT. If it's not ALS or BLS, the transport should not happen from AMR's side. But I guess from a business perspective, it still happens. So we've had those conversations with AMR and Medics and making sure that, again, they even from their operational side do not provide the transport when in fact it's an NEMT. If they don't have the vehicle, then they need to explain to the hospital that the service cannot be provided. But I think, again, from an operational perspective, they're not going to say no. But from the vehicle for hire ordinance, again, as part of the education campaign, we can outline the number of companies that are with, in that type of service that they can provide to the hospitals. The problem is it's usually 24 hours in advance, and the hospitals are needing a transport that day.
So the hospitals do they normally just call AMR or Medics instead of looking for 27 names?
I cannot answer that. When I spoke to the CEOs, it was my understanding that they use AMR and Medics as they should. And then when I speak to gathering information from AMR and Medics, it's the other way. So. Again, without us going in there and helping facilitate these conversations and help finding a resolution, I can't answer that fully today.
Okay. Brooke, going into the data collection, now you provided your own data, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
What's the best method, or since you're in the business, in terms of addressing this data collection issue that we need to address?
From our standpoint or from the hospital's standpoint?
From the holistic perspective, like, how do we address this issue? How do we, get this issue solved?
Well, I can tell you it starts with the providers, in that our data is collected and stamped from our state-of-the-art CAD system. Our vehicles have vehicle locators in them, GPS, so their locations en route and arrival are tracked via GPS, and that data is entered into our computer. Then the crew members carry a portable cellular device with them that also contains the same GPS locator that is used in the dispatch CAD to the point to where they actually make patient contact. I can tell you that's the way we gather our data, and the data that we provided to staff came in that manner. We would be happy to, on the go forward, to sit with the hospitals and with staff to look at the best practices and the best ways to capture that data collectively, as well as ongoing education on the best way, the most appropriate way to call, the most appropriate levels of service to ask for, and how to determine those.
Okay. Thank you. I just have one,
Sure, take as
one more
long as you
question. I do have a question for the fire chief. This is a tough question because I'm trying to understand, kind of like, from the fire chief's perspective, in terms of, like, what's your position on how we should address this issue?
Well, I think in the end, it is certainly your decision, and I think the best we can hope for is that public safety provides you the information to make the best decision. I can tell you that historically, we've worked very well with the previous environment. Recognizing that the healthcare district had some special needs, it certainly does make sense to include them. But there's something to be said about that one point of contact, you know, a group that has a history, a group that we've worked well with in the past. I can't speak to the issues or concerns of the hospital, but I can just tell you from a public safety perspective, we've been in a good space and hope to continue in that environment.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernard. Thank you, Chief. Also, Brooke, you don't need to come to the microphone, but there were some comments and discussions about the 8,500 transports that probably shouldn't have been done by AMR just because of the level of care required. I don't want AMR at all to think that we're chastising AMR for doing that. I believe you did a public service and your company did a public service. You don't get to screen the calls when you're asked to help interfacility transport. So those 8,500 were probably a loss leader because I'm familiar with the vehicle for hire reimbursement rates, and you're bringing a fully staffed ambulance out, but you're there, you transported the patient. I'm not speaking for the board from my behalf, only my personal perspective. Thank you for accommodating those 8,500 unnecessary trips that could have been handled by a lower level of care. Vice Mayor Weinroth, and then we'll go to Commissioner Marino.
Thank you, Mayor. Stephanie, I am struck by the structural inefficiency of the system. And I'm not pointing fingers at emergency services or anybody, but I'm looking at a system that we have used for fire and police. We don't have our residents call the fire department to get a response. We don't have them call the police department to get a response. They call 911 and the call is triaged and they make a decision, what is the best course of action, what's the best response. But we're not doing that in this area. We're making direct calls to the vendors, and now they're being left with calls that they shouldn't be handling. Either they should be vehicles for hire, or maybe it's a higher class of service. Over and above what we're going to make a decision here today, I think that this begs the question of what can be done to make this more efficient. I mean, does it need a central dispatch so that, number one, we can now capture the data and we don't have to rely upon all the individual entities out there that are using the service. But number two, that we can manage this more effectively and understand this is a vehicle for hire necessity, this is a person who, it's trauma, we need to get the fire department out there right now, or whatever the necessity is, rather than leaving it to the person making the phone call to make the decision. Do you, in this process, have you concluded that maybe the system is broken and needs to be a little refined?
Yeah,
Let me just interject real quick. Excellent question, Vice Mayor, but let me recognize the County Administrator for a brief moment.
And I'd like to answer that question. That is a very excellent question, and it's a matter of how deep do you want us involved in private sector collaboration. I would ask this board, because I agree on the data. This county has moved toward a more data-driven process than we have in the past. This ordinance is 6 years old, and I can tell you I've been here for a minute, and this is probably the smoothest this process has ever gone as long as I can remember. And so this ordinance was put in place. We've learned a lot. We've got a number of things that Stephanie pointed out, Ms. Shanahan pointed out, that we need to go back and address. And so if this board would allow us, because we agree, we need better data. We need to look to Miami-Dade, find out what they're doing, talk to AMR and other providers along with the hospital, allow us to get together, come up with a process, run it through the EMS council, and then bring that recommendation back to the board, so that whatever system we bring, we have buy-in or a reason which the private sector can come and speak to the board as to why we shouldn't do whatever it is that we're going to be bringing before you. But I have to tell you that I would prefer to work with the private sector and let the private sector handle this particular issue, as opposed to government creating another entity because I would need additional staff or pay for additional staff for dispatching for this particular purpose.
And I certainly would welcome that. And I just wonder, Ms. Baker, since you're bringing this up, do we know how often we are actually dispatching fire units when we really shouldn't have, that we should have been relying upon the AMR or lower levels of service, and that fire is winding up making a response because, again, it hasn't been triaged and they're receiving the call? Or in the alternative, do they have the option of saying, this is not a fire response, we are going to refer you to AMR, MCT, XYZ? I mean, how does that work?
Well, I think when people dial 911, normally it's an emergency. There is a message that goes out, and I'll let Stephanie expound on this, but there is a message that says, if this is not an emergency, please hang up and dial another number. So if your cat is in a tree, you probably ought to call the other number. Do people hang up and do that? Not necessarily. So I'll let Stephanie answer that, expand on
Yeah,
that.
just on the point of 911, they're required to respond regardless. But I think I can't answer to as far as tracking the information of the type of call that came in and whether it was necessary for 911. But I think regardless, whether an interfacility calls them or a resident, where it's not necessarily an emergency, they're required to respond. But maybe we can let our chief answer that. I don't.
Well, Stephanie, let me take this one step further. Let's say my mother's in the hospital. I want her to be transferred to another facility. 3 hours later, no one has come. I'm done waiting. I call 911. So you're saying now fire is going to go ahead and make the transport.
They're required to respond.
Do we quantify how often that's occurring?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Chief Durin, I guess it's your turn.
Sorry, chief.
Well, absolutely. You reach out to 911, Palm Beach County Fire Rescue is going to come. And that's sort of verifying the fact that a call was made. As the county administrator said, someone called 911. We typically want to verify that call. Now, how often it transpires into something that we look back and say, perhaps Randall Easton, how old am I? AMR would have taken care of that call. We don't typically delve into that. We're more concerned with taking care of the situation and putting some resolution to it to make the customer as satisfied as we possibly can.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. Yeah, one last question, and not for the chief. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. We've been talking a lot about the delay of transporting patients. And I understand, and I've heard from the hospitals, and I certainly understand their concerns, especially as patients are sitting there for hours, and there's throughput issues, and I've been told anecdotally there are situations where patients, especially patients with brain issues, are difficult to keep them under control while they're waiting, and they could be injured during that period of time. But we haven't talked about situations where the call is made, the vehicle arrives, and the patient is not ready, and they're sitting there for a period of time. AMR has given us an exhibit. Can you validate it? Can you tell us if this is characteristic of all of the transporting being done?
Yeah, so for a period of 2 years, 55% of the requests from the facilities, so that's your hospitals or your assisted living facilities, for AMR, the patient was not ready for transport within 30 minutes, and that's a requirement of our ordinance. And for medics, the same thing, 53% of the requests from the facilities, the patient was not ready.
All right, so it's a two-way street here. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
All right, we're going to move to Commissioner Marino, but again, just to your point, it seems like one of the biggest issues in the COPCN issue or licensing vote that we're going to take is we're unraveling and uncovering the need for a single point of contact, and that whether it's vehicle for hire and there's 27 different companies, or whether it's a hospital calling 911 without bothering to call AMR. From that perspective only, taking all the data and other stuff we've talked about, what's the most efficient act for this board to take to ensure that there's a single point of contact? Because my understanding is AMR and medics have one unified CAD system in place versus introducing now a third or fourth provider which they could call at random and have everyone show up all at one time, and whoever wins, wins.
So I think that kind of going back to our COPCN process, we have 3 types of applications. We have a special secondary, which is one type of system, right? One type of dispatch system. We have our secondary, which is another type, and then we have our primary, which is a third type. So you have 911, private ambulance, and then ALS, BLS services prior to 911 getting in there. They have a connection, a radio system in place to work. The special secondaries have a radio system in place to work with the 911 where they'll get called so that community resident has somebody there within 3 minutes. Those are called the special secondary.
When you say special secondary, that's only a small percentage of communities in our county that
I
have
think
an HOA.
there's about 16 or 17 in our county. So when we talk about having one system, you're never going to have one system for all of those needs, right? The hospitals, I think, whether they call one number for AMR or medics, or they call another number for, say, you add an additional company, they're still going to have to call either 911 or they're going to have to call an NEMT. So there's still more numbers there's never going to be one system.
Sure, and that's not going to be resolved today. It seems like there's some interest in the board in going towards that system,
Yes.
but just the question asked was, does AMR and medics have a unified dispatch system?
Yes, they do.
And does adding other providers to this COPCN process give the option for ambulances and ALFs to call whoever they want or call everyone at the same time and see who shows up?
Okay, so there would be, if another provider was added, it's my understanding there would be another dispatch system in place. And it is also my understanding that those hospitals and ALFs and ALFs and nursing homes would contract with the agency. And right now, because there's only one agency, they only have one to call. But say there is another agency, there could be conditions put in the contract with the hospital, I'll use them as an example, and the private provider to say that, once you call us, you cannot call until it's deemed I'm unresponsive. So those are, I think, contract terms that could be negotiated between the hospitals and the private ambulance. But I cannot speak for what the hospitals would choose to do.
Nor their compliance with any prior contractual obligations, because I've seen a lot of evidence that they call 911, particularly Green Acres Fire Rescue, because they're in District 3 and District 2, and I work with them closely. I've seen CAD after CAD report where they don't bother to call AMR, they just call 911.
Yeah.
Does that happen?
I have not gotten any of that data or that information. We were not focused on the 911. That's the primary, which is up for next year. So we only have information associated with the secondary.
Despite any contractual obligations, is it possible that it happens?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Marino, you're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you. The current ordinance that's in place, that is a 6-year ordinance, how long has it been a 6-year, or how long has this ordinance read that it was every 6 years?
The ordinance has been in place since, at least 20 years or more. The 6-year requirement, to my knowledge, has been in place since December of 2000.
And in that time, has anyone besides AMR and medics been the provider?
No.
Okay. We are growing leaps and bounds in our county. Hospitals are growing. I've spoken with many of our hospital directors, and they are all in favor of adding. Chief Duren, I'm a little confused. Are you in favor of adding more than just the healthcare district? Because I heard in the beginning you weren't, and then you were. So your position is adding, because technically AMR and medics to me is one organization, healthcare district is another, MC, what did you call them, ABC? MCT, all county would be an additional. Are you in favor of adding all county to the equation?
Well, Commissioner, as I said, my concern is the impact of fire rescue. And our existing relationship doesn't have challenges. What I was respectful of the fact is that in the investigation or report that Public Safety discovered said there are some challenges in the system. Those are not fire rescue's challenges. So when I speak from My position, it is as the fire chief, and the concerns and implication of Palm Beach County Fire Rescue, we were fine with maintaining status quo, though also identifying, because I've talked very much with the healthcare district, and we had conversations regarding their need, and they do have a unique need, so it makes sense to address that. So the initial recommendation by Public Safety, I was in full support for, as well as the second one, because I don't know the impacts related to the hospitals. So from my perspective, I'm happy where we were, but certainly I agree we have to add the healthcare district as part of the plan.
Okay, so that doesn't actually answer my question.
That's it, but that's his answer, Commissioner Moreno.
No, from the presentation, it said that you had changed your perspective. So your original perspective was just AMR medics, and then yes to add the healthcare district, or yes to add the healthcare district and all county?
I'm understanding of the position that public safety is taking currently. However, from my perspective, from the view that I have, I was perfectly happy with status quo and where we were. But the decision is in the hand of the commission. And I'm only giving you my perspective from where I sat. I didn't think of it from the perspective of the hospitals. I didn't have that information. I wasn't asked to quantify that. I'm simply saying the existing system with the healthcare district, I believe, suits the needs of fire rescue and will not have an impact on our services.
And if fire rescue answered 8,000 calls, I think that was the number we were given, right? 8,000 calls that it shouldn't have been?
8,500, but that was by
AMR calls.
AMR.
Okay.
AMR handled those.
AMR handled 911 calls, is that what we're saying?
No,
Or
just for point of
911 handled
clarification.
AMR calls?
There were 8,500 calls, which should have been vehicle for hire calls, were responded to by AMR at the hospitals or ALF's request, and they handled them as an act of kindness, I guess.
And do we have a number of how many 911 calls were handled where 911 handled them and AMR did not? That's the opposite question. We don't have that number.
No.
So we're trying to make a decision based on data, and we don't have all the data. The one thing that we do know is that as a population, our county is growing. Hospital providers are going to be growing. The hospital administrators that I've spoken to are all in favor of adding the healthcare district and an additional provider. When I look at your when I look at the voting list here, and I look down, I see that the hospital providers voted yes, the Palm Beach County Medical Director voted yes, EMS educator voted yes, ER physician voted yes, and ER nurses voted yes. So I look at this and I say the people that are calling for the service themselves, not the provider of the service, but the people calling for the service, seem to believe that we need to add not only the healthcare district, but an additional provider. Is that correct? Is that what you are telling us?
Yes.
Okay. What, I have the same thing. I know, I saw that. But I talked to one of the other hospital administrators within that organization, and they said yes. So I have spoken to probably 8 hospital CEO representatives, and they have all said to me that they were in favor of adding an additional provider other than the healthcare district. So that's where I am, and I'm done with my questions. Thank you.
All right, just with regards to Commissioner Moreno's question relating to prior ambulance providers to this county, was there ever an all-American ambulance service that operated in our county under COPCN?
No. The COPCN, all-American?
All-American,
I haven't. You mean American Ambulance? No,
American,
I haven't heard. What's the?
it's
one that-
American
do you know?
Ambulance. There's American Ambulance, I think.
So American Ambulance is who
Yeah.
applied for the COPCN 6 years ago.
Okay.
But they were denied
They were
by the
denied.
board.
Okay.
I don't know their DBA, maybe, are you,
I'm not sure. I'm trying to get the information from you.
Are you talking about the one that was permitted to apply under the emergency, or to operate under the emergency declaration for COVID?
No, it was prior to that. I think it went bankrupt or something. Does that ring a bell? She's shaking her head. I'll recognize you, ma'am.
yeah, they did not.
What's that?
They went bankrupt? They went bankrupt? The American Ambulance Service that applied for a COPCN, secondary COPCN 6 years ago, was also known, doing business as Falk. They are no longer in business.
Okay, and they never provided any service to us?
Correct. They never provided service.
You know, in relation to their application to serve our residents, that they went bankrupt? Do you know what time frame thereafter they went bankrupt? Was it during the pendency of the application?
No, it wasn't during their application, because otherwise we would have then updated the board item. So, no.
I think Commissioner McKinley may be the only person on this board that's actively dealt with the COPCN issue in the past, our senior commissioner. So, and certainly I can't speak with her behind the closed doors, so I wanted to ask that question here in public. All right, looks like that's the bulk of questions from commissioners at this point. We'll certainly have opportunity to make our comments and ask further questions, but I think public comment would be in order at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first person will be Gary Brandenburg, followed by Henry Handler.
Mr. Mayor, it's important to note while they're walking to the microphone that Todd Bonlaren is now as old as I am, so.
How does that work? Congratulations. You're catching up.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you very much for your patience on this issue. I'd like to thank staff for all the work they put into this. And particularly, we wanted to note that Medics Ambulance Service, who I represent, has providing service here in Palm Beach County since 2002. They've provided 19 years of reliable service to the county. We really appreciate your consideration for the extension of their CPON today, and we look forward to many more years of our partnership with the county. With respect to the healthcare taxing district, Medics fully supports their application and would support you granting that. With respect to the other applicants, we believe that there are fundamental negative consequences that will result. These issues have not been fully vetted with the database information or research. We urge you to move carefully before the best system in the state of Florida, which has taken 40 years to develop, is jeopardized. For instance, currently, AMR and Medics must respond to all legitimate calls. Adding another private company means that the providers can just say, oh, we're too busy, call the other company. So which calls will actually be serviced? Those providers will service the calls that provide them the most money. The other calls, too busy, call the other company. So the lesser paying or the no-pay calls will not be served. It will leave the poor and uninsured parties out in the cold. It'll set up the blame game between the different parties and the finger-pointing that's going on between them. Between March 1st, 2020 and May of 21, there were more than 8,500 calls that's been mentioned here today that the existing providers provided service for. Who's going to provide that service in this new system? They're going to say, call the other company. Another example, down in Miami-Dade, MCT responds to less than 20% of the 911 calls they receive from Miami-Dade Fire Rescue. Sometimes they don't even answer the phone. That's not a good thing to set up here in Palm Beach County. In St. Lucie County, where MCT operates, AMR had to be called in to vacate the hospitals during the middle of a hurricane. Again, not a situation where you want to rely on that company. Century Ambulance, during Hurricane Michael in 2018, stopped operating altogether in the Panhandle. Other providers had to step in to handle all the transports.
Mr. Brandenburg, your time has expired. We appreciate
you.
your comments. Thank you.
We have Mr. Henry Handler, followed by Bill Hall.
Henry Handler, the law firm of Weiss Handler, Cornwell, 2255 Glades Road, Boca Raton. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, Commissioners, I represent AMR in support of its award of a COPCN in addition to COPCNs to Medics Ambulance and to the Healthcare District. During this last year, COVID had an undeniable impact on ambulance transport services. For the first time in 6 years, AMR had a below 90% on-time rate. It does not necessarily follow that your public policy conclusion should be that there is a need for a fourth provider. We have already spoken about and we recognize about COVID's impact, the absence of non-medical transportation, the CDC guidelines for screening and testing, and how that impacts the ability to deliver patients from hospitals to other locations. It is inaccurate, unfair, and short-sighted, I submit to you, to believe that the consequences of those events create a present need for a fourth provider which will improve service in the next COPCN cycle. The data shows that over the last 6 years, COCPN transport declined. This downturn arises from the change in the delivery of health care, as the process pushes more patients to be treated at home and out of hospitals. It is anticipated in the industry that this trend will continue. Of course, there was no analysis today, but we did recognize that there is new legislation for not-for-profit, faith-based voluntary ambulance services. If we want to place trust in the marketplace, then without regulation, there's going to be a host of potential providers to meet any kind of need that's being reported to you, in effect, anecdotally, by the hospitals. One such service is ready to go, the Hatzalah Company in Boynton Beach. And please also remember that AMR and Medics share a redundant digital dispatching system with a direct line of communication with fire rescue. It is not hard to imagine that multiple or simultaneous calls to AMR and a fourth provider can disrupt the coordination that the existing dispatching service provides. For all of those reasons, or for any one of those reasons, we request that COCPNs be awarded to AMR, Medics, and the Healthcare District. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Handler.
After Bill Hall will be Isabel Rodriguez.
Morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the Commission. I wanted to elaborate a little further on what Mr. Little was talking about. 3 minutes is usually not enough time for me to speak, so I'll try to go pretty quickly. Commissioner Marino, you elaborated to the growth in our community. That is correct. But I have facts of the matter here that shows the degradation of our call volume year over year from an ambulance perspective. With the new onset of community medicine and how it's being delivered, and we're intimately involved with that. With the skilled nursing facilities now being more well-versed in doing in-house treatment, with fire rescue chief and his agency participating in the ET3 programs that will allow people to be treated at home and released, this number is going to continue to go down. These are facts. These are not made-up numbers. The second piece is that I want to make certain that people are not confused that we're here today for an ambulance COPC hearing, and we keep getting the non-medical transports lumped in. The non-medical transports that we did in the last calendar year was done because we are a true healthcare partner. We did not have to take those calls. We are only contracted in the subscription areas, which falls through the Florida Insurance Program, to respond to the non-medical calls. We have ambulance contracts, and that's what our expertise is, and that's what we're here today to see if there's a necessity. So the 8,500 transports that we ran, we had zero reimbursement for those transports, Commission. On top of that, we incurred $2,040,000 worth of expense. It costs $240 per ambulance transport in Palm Beach County for us to run a call. We did not waver or even have a concern or issue of going out and doing the job. So the vehicle for hire, the non-medical companies, non-medical wheelchairs and non-medical stretchers falling under the EMS and being governed, because if they're licensed in Palm Beach County, they should have to participate in these transportation. But what happened during COVID was, 40 seconds. What happened during COVID was these companies downsized or went out of business, and they weren't available. So we weren't going to deny these citizens from being transported, and we weren't going to be disrespectful to our healthcare partners. The last piece of that, and I wish I had more than 3 minutes, is the real thing to work on if the hospitals are asking for assistance is us collectively getting together, formulating a structured team that can work on us being on scene 54% of the time that they call us. We are on scene on upwards to an hour. That is about 20,000 unit hours wasted. And the 8,500 transports that we ran from non-medical was about 17,000 more that can be infused into the true ambulance patients who have a necessity to be transported.
Quick question, Mr. Hull. Thank you for your testimony, and I'll disclose that I've gotten to know you pretty well over the last year, and before anyone raises their eyebrows, it's because of my service as county mayor and in the EOC and on the executive policy group. And, you know, every time that this county has been in an emergency status and has had the need to reach out to AMR or medics, you guys have delivered consistently from my perspective. So I was hoping that you can just inform the commission in a concise way what your involvement was with this county and with the state with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Holy cow, that's a lot. We've administered over 100,000 vaccines. We have staffed 12 different sites at the snap of a finger. Matter of fact, I think we first staffed the first site down in Fort Lauderdale. Was the first test model. We've done FAU, we did the Civic Center. We did all of the nursing home and ALF's distribution of information from the CDC. We went around and we did all the first vaccinations for the SNFs and ALFs in Broward County. We've partnered with the state throughout every county in the state, even the counties that we don't participate and have a COPCN, we were participating in this. We were called upon by Homeland Security to secure our borders of the airports and test test residents that were flying in or flying out to make certain that they weren't sick. So we were doing that, and we did that for 6 months. And we're still ongoing, and we're in the process right now with Palm Beach County, and it should be signed today, signing a contract to do the monoclonal infusions, and we're excited about that.
Which, that was brought to this board by Commissioner Bernard, and I brought it to the EPG and the administrator. And I'm very thankful to hear that I think this might be a first in the nation with a public-private provider to bring the monoclonal antibody therapy to a community free of charge. So thank you for that. One last question, and it can be answered in one sentence, and we'll get to Vice Mayor Weinroth. Commissioner Marino asked our Chief Fire Rescue and Administrator to describe the relationship between fire rescue and the COPCN license holders, which would be you and medics. And his response was perfectly happy and don't have any challenges. I'm going to ask you the same question. How would you describe your current working relationship with fire rescue, whether it's at the municipal or county level?
Outstanding. Outstanding. Not just with fire rescue, but the healthcare district as well, which is why we're on record supporting them 110%. They are vested in this community, sustainable operations, and are familiar with this area. We took a long time to build a core nucleus and have a span of control. And Mayor, your county, I run other counties as well, is the best run ambulance and EMS county, bar none. Highest level of service. I do not. Highest level of service. You're the only county that has minimal staff requirements of an EMT on our ambulances. That's a fact.
Very good. And just one point of clarification, AMR was a representative and voting member of the EMS Council. I think you guys resigned. Was that in concern and fairness out of conflict of interest issues?
That was, and I think that we're going to be putting in a motion or asking if I could be on that council.
Okay.
We'll go forward.
Very good. Vice Mayor Weinroth may have a question for you.
Mr. Hall.
Yes, sir.
The elephant in the room. Let's talk about the criticism that's coming from the hospitals that they are waiting too long for patients to be transferred. What do we do to fix that?
So if you look at the ordinance, first of all, I believe that the vehicle for hire component, you know, if a company gets licensed in non-medical companies, they go through the consumer affairs and vehicle for hire. If we move that over, we're governed. EMS is governed. If we move the non-medical wheelchair and non-medical stretcher companies over to be governed by the EMS office, I believe you're going to have better participation. They need to be available when they're called upon. And if you look at the ordinance written in vehicle for hire, you're allowed to give 24 hours in advance service. So you're saying, or 24-hour delay service. So you call for a call today at 12 o'clock, you get a 12 o'clock pickup for tomorrow. We didn't do that. And that's where I think some of the confusion came in, especially from the hospitals, is that we respond, and commissioners, this is a 6-year cycle, COPCN. The first 5 years, we did 307,000 transports, and we were 92% on compliant. And we do have the state-of-the-art dispatch center, which some of you did come down, and we are true to our tracking methods and can open those up to anybody who would like to see them. I believe a better working relationship, bring the non-medical companies under the vehicle for hire, have the hospitals and have the ambulance companies, even EMS, come and participate in some of the functions that we used to do back in the day, and that's workshops, education, because non-medical necessity changes every year. So what can be transported in an ambulance today may not meet that criteria a year from now. I believe it's continual education, Vice Mayor.
And I certainly am, acknowledging the redundant digital dispatch system, which is certainly something that, as you've heard, I have concerns about the system in general, and certainly anything that disrupts that, I have some concerns about. So I like the idea that essentially everything is going to a central dispatch, whether it's one company or two companies, however your corporate organization is. But I'm still concerned, and yes, there was a pandemic, but is there a capacity issue? Are we looking at how many of these calls are you changing the time that they've asked for the pickup and delaying it by several hours, or I'm assuming it would never be more than several hours. How many of your calls do you ask to have them rescheduled to a different time, and is that being factored into these that we're now calling not ready or not picked up when ready?
We do negotiate times, and why we do that is I'll give you an instance. Hospital A calls us, and we have 4 or 5 trucks at that hospital. We're trying to work on improvement for throughput as well. So we'll allocate those 4 trucks over there, and we'll say, you have 4 trucks. Let's put a little onus on them as well to make certain that the patients are ready at time of pickup, and then those 4 trucks will service your hospital. So let's move this to 2 o'clock, this one to 3 o'clock, this one to 4 o'clock, and we'll bang them out with the 4 units via system status. So that does occur, and we try to do that in a working relationship. And are we perfect? No, but I can tell you right now, it's very disheartening when you're a very passionate individual who takes pride in what they're doing, and then the first 5 years of your COPCN, you're not even really being judged. We go above and beyond by doing these patients because the non-medical companies weren't available to do this, and now all of a sudden, all this is being thrown in, and staff did a great job at gathering data and all, but the fact of the matter is that data has all these non-medical calls in it, and that data associated didn't take into consideration that 17,000 unit hours were not readily accessible to the Palm Beach County citizens in an ambulance because they are running a non-medical call for the vehicle for hire companies that are not being monitored.
Are you projecting that the Palm Beach yearly trips are going to continue to trend down?
Absolutely, absolutely, positively. We are intimately working right now with community-based medicines. You're going to see some of the commissioners who are being affected or their areas are going to have, that will be working in. I've disclosed some information to them, but you'll see that communities are going to get way more versed in having patients treated there versus going and inundating the hospital systems for people who truly don't need to be there. And the same thing with fire rescue and their ET3 programs, and the same thing with the nursing homes. The nursing homes were building these models, and they were kind of forced to go a little quicker with COVID because, as you know, we were trying to keep patients in and treat. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for everything you've done during this emergency. I appreciate your partnership.
Thank you all.
After Isabel Rodriguez will be Brooke Alido.
Good morning. Isabel Rodriguez, Director of Operations for Medics Ambulance Service, 12600 Northwest 107th Avenue, Medley, Florida, 33178. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and members of the commission. I honestly want to say that half of my script was already discussed, so I think you guys are brilliant. But we have some information that we left out. Commissioners, before you today, we have the same player that was present 6 years ago. And to your point, the only commissioner that was on the dais was Commissioner McLean. So I want to go ahead and add that. So it was the same player, different company, same complaints, but more importantly, what's more peculiar is the same timing. A month right before the COPCN renewal process is starting up, they'll come in and make a mockery of what we consider the best Palm Beach County transportation system. We have a defined system where you have your 911 and emergent calls by fire. You have your interfacility stable patients by your private ambulances, and everything else that does not need medical attention en route is your non-emergency transportation vehicles. Something that I would like to also clarify is that those 8,500 calls that when they were requested, the hospitals did not request paratransit. They requested, and to their understanding, they were requesting BLS, which is your basic life support. This is why we feel, and we definitely were on board to continue the pre-COVID process that we had, which was educating the case managers, educating them on the correct level of services. So it's unfortunate that during that pandemic, we are being, I guess, judged on our performance. I think transparency and integrity is key during any COPCN process, and we're not going to shy away from it. You see the data. We reported that we were below for the first time in the previous 5 years. We were above average. As part of my job, I did some due diligence to make sure what were the reasons for these underperforming, I guess, if you will, or delays, and they were all patient safety. New processes were set in place. We had new restricted doors at facilities. We had our crews having to have temperature checks. They had to be screened to be entered into the facility multiple times during the day. And lastly, facilities that are now asking for help, we're requiring negative COVID tests, which in that itself takes 20 minutes to get a result. I can tell you that we are very proudly and have been serving Palm Beach County since 2002. We have our heroes here, and during the pandemic, and despite all that, we afforded and enhanced our benefits. We're very generous with them, not only to improve them, but more importantly, because we had a lot of challenges, like everyone else in the healthcare industry, where healthcare clinicians are being traveling positions in COVID position jobs. So a lot of facilities, including the hospitals, have voiced concerns that we do have some challenges with clinicians taking positions at COVID traveling sites. Lastly, I just want to thank you for your time, and I appreciate your assistance today in listening to our matter.
Thank you, ma'am.
After Brooke Little will be Stephen King.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, staff. Brooke Little, Chief of Operations, AMR. I'm happy to be here today to talk a little bit about what we do. To echo on what Mr. Hall said, AMR has been vetted, and we're invested in this community. One of the things that we've done over the last couple of years is we partnered with the Palm Beach County School Board and CareerSource to provide high school students career pathways. We provide them with employment with benefits and pay for their education in an Earn While You Learn program. In addition to that, every year, as an example, we train thousands of people in hands-only CPR. That's a yearly, last year we didn't do it, but normally we do that every year. During hurricane activities, AMR is ready to provide ambulance transport and assistance to fire rescue if needed. We have fleets of resources available at a moment's notice, which is why AMR was chosen by FEMA over the other providers. When an entire hospital or group of nursing homes needs to be evacuated, we provide the resources to make sure the patients arrive at their destinations safely and without issue. Currently, as previously stated, all your private ambulance providers are dispatched via a unified state-of-the-art communication center. We track every evacuation transport from beginning to end, and all the data is recorded. No patient gets lost in the system. During the pandemic, AMR answered the bell every time the state or the county needed us, as mentioned before as well. We assisted the Department of Health with Dr. Alonso. The one thing I did want to add into that is collectively between AMR and Medics in 2020, we transported over 10,000 COVID infectious criteria patients. And as Isa had stated, there's an additional time that it takes to transport those patients with the facility screening, the donning and doffing, the testing, and the decontamination of the vehicles. In closing, I wanted to say again that AMR fully supports the healthcare district, and we're there to assist them, to work with them. We're there to work with staff in any of the projects that they want to look at in the future to help further better how data is tracked, the education on the differences and the level of services. We'll be there to help with that as well.
Thank you, Brooke, and thank you for your service, sir.
After Stephen will be Richard Giroux, or Gisu, I'm not sure.
Good morning. Mayor, Commissioners, good morning. My name is Dr. Stephen Keene. I'm the ED Medical Director at JFK North, as well as the Chairman of the Palm Beach County EMS Medical Directors Association, Assistant Medical Director for West Palm Beach Fire Department, Medical Director for Palm Beach Shores Fire Department, Medical Director for Palm Beach County Ocean Rescue, and Medical Director for HCI College. I'm speaking to you today in my capacity as an emergency department physician. By way of background, I became in my medical career as an EMT and firefighter, and then a paramedic. I worked in private sector EMS and fire service before becoming a physician. Because of my background and role as a physician today, I feel I am uniquely qualified to share my opinion on the matter before you today. There are times when I find it necessary to transfer a patient from my hospital at JFK North to another facility to receive specialty service. In some instances, the movement of these patients is critical to their outcome and survival. I reviewed the response time data of the existing private ambulance provider supplied to the county. Respectfully, I struggle with that data, and let me explain why. If I request an emergency transport at 12 noon and am told the first available time is 3 p.m., the private provider does not arrive till 3 p.m., as it appears the private provider is showing an on-time arrival and counting that request as on-time in their data. Let me give you the reality of that situation. I need that ambulance to respond immediately based on my 12 noon request, not 3 hours later. I will tell you that I had that very situation occur, and 3 hours later, when the private provider did respond, that patient became unstable, and after 3 repeated attempts at resuscitation, regrettably, I lost that patient. When we do call fire rescue because of long ETAs by the existing provider, fire rescue does respond immediately. I appreciate that, but I cannot tell you the number of times fire service does respond grumbling that this is not their role, and where is the private provider? Why are they having to perform this transport? I agree. The role of fire rescue is to provide 911 service, and the role of private sector is to respond to my request for service promptly and provide care and transport for my critically ill patient. Mayor, Commissioners, I became a physician because I love caring for people. I do not want my comments today to be misconstrued as an indictment on the current provider, as I am truly grateful for their service. Rather, my comments today come from my heart and based on my frontline experience. I truly love what I do, but to be put in the position of not being able to provide timely EMS transportation that can be the determining factor in a patient's survival is incomprehensible and gut-wrenching. I implore you to add more private sector EMS service in Palm Beach County. I can tell you with a certainty that competition breeds good service. I know this from my private sector EMS and fire service experience. Palm Beach County is very large geographically. When I look to Dade and Broward counties, they have multiple private ambulance service providers. Why don't we? As I explained, the current data is not an accurate reflection of the crisis we face in this county. Please, in the best interest of Palm Beach County residents and visitors, add more service. Give us choice in who we request. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, and I think we'll have a couple questions. Thank you, first of all, for your appearance today, and most importantly, your service as emergency physician and your prior service as a fire rescue professional. I think there's probably going to be some concern on this board about some comments that you made with regards to the impact on human life when fire rescue doesn't respond to an emergent and acute situation. Can you give us a little bit more information about that?
I was saying fire rescue does. I was saying sometimes the delayed response for the private provider causes delay. I've had a patient pass away, unfortunately, because of the delay. Maybe they would have passed away regardless, but we have to call 911 to sometimes with these emergent cases to have people respond.
I'm not familiar with the protocols of an emergency room, but if there is an emergent situation where they needed to be transferred to a trauma center or something like that, and time is critically of the essence, emergency department shouldn't be calling for interfacility transport, correct?
So we have a policy in place. We go through our transfer center, and for instance, if I have a patient that needs to go to the trauma center, we would call the transfer center, and they would call AMR to transport them. If we call 911, and we have done that for certain situations, you're taking the 911 vehicle out of service to provide 911 emergency care to the community.
Sure, but I think that this county is well-resourced to handle, whether it's a municipal department or county department, to handle emergency calls. That's why 911 is there. Is this a practice of HCA or some particular corporation that says not to contact 911 when someone's life is on the line?
No, that is not true. I call 911 when I have someone who is going to die. I personally, years ago, I was working at JFK Maine. I had a patient who was stabbed in the chest, and we called 911 because minutes was a risk. So I actually got in the back of the ambulance with 911 and went to the trauma center with that patient. So we did do our best to try to save that patient's life.
Do you attribute any of these critically ill patients passing to the interfacility service being provided, or is it a situation where 911 didn't respond timely?
No, I was saying it was from interfacility transport that I've noticed that sometimes the time, there's delay. There's a lot of transport. It's not always, but some people need to be transported home from inpatient status. Some people need to be transported home or to a nursing home facility from the ER after being discharged. Some people need to be transported from the ER to another ER.
Sure. I guess maybe we need to follow up on this issue because I'm concerned about the comments made here today that people's lives are being put at risk because of either not enough units from the government are on call to respond in a 911 emergency situation, or hospitals are relying unnecessarily for the interfacility system to transport acute emergent situations.
So I think we need more service. More people are moving into the county. The population's increasing. I think we need more service, and I think more private ambulance services would be beneficial to everyone in the county. That's my opinion.
Okay. Commissioner Vice Mayor Weinroth, and then Commissioner McKinley.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor. And again, I appreciate your remarks here, and I'm certainly not a doctor and don't profess to be one. But I share the mayor's concern with the remarks that you've made today. And perhaps you need to educate me, because when I'm thinking of interfacility transport, I'm thinking of someone who is not in a condition that we're going to be worried whether there's a 3-hour delay or a 5-hour delay on the ability of that person to survive. I'm looking at people who are being transferred because the services they need are better suited at another location. And if we are dealing with someone, and of course were no way for you to know that that condition was going to deteriorate to the point where you lost the patient. But I'm wondering, please correct me if I'm wrong, was this the appropriate method of moving a patient that was in that condition? Or would a 911 call been the more appropriate vehicle to get immediate response and have that patient transported and hopefully saved?
So in general, when we have, for instance, a stroke patient, if I'm at a primary center, I'm not at a comprehensive center, I don't have the stroke team at my facility. There's only, I think, 4 comprehensive stroke centers in the county. If we're at a primary center that doesn't have that, you're going to transfer that patient to the comprehensive center. In general, we would call for an ALS transport. We would call our transfer center, and they would send AMR, medics would respond for those kind of transfers. For instance, STEMIs as well. I don't have a STEMI center at my facility. I cannot, we don't do cath at our facility. So I'd have to transfer that patient. So,
Again, doctor, I don't want to second guess a medical opinion because you certainly have a lot more experience in that regard than I do, and your experience that you've laid out in your CV is very impressive. But I'm just worried that a patient that had the potential for deteriorating during a 3-hour wait would have been a patient that should have possibly gone in a different transport medium, and that a 911 call on that patient might have been the more appropriate decision versus making the decision after you were told you had to wait 3 hours to let that patient linger for 3 hours and ultimately deteriorate. And again, I don't want to put you on the spot here. And
no, it's fine. I'm happy to be. I think every case is different. In general, when I have a patient that I don't have the resources at my facility or any ER in the county or nationwide, I have a patient. I've worked in many different states in this country. If I have a patient at any hospital in the country that I don't have the resources, the specialists at that facility, I need to transport them. In general, the majority of the time, they would go not with 911. It would be a secondary provider that would do that service. And that's how it works when I worked in Georgia, Maryland, New York, California. That's how it works. Generally, 911 is for 911 calls.
Understood. And again, I thank you for your testimony today. County Administrator, I think this is another point that we need a triage system that would be able to address a kind of a situation like this and perhaps make a decision whether a 3-hour delay was appropriate in this kind of a situation, or whether an alternate means of moving the patient might have been more appropriate. And I don't want to have a long discussion about this from up here. But again, I thank you very much for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you very much.
I think we just have one more question for you. Commissioner McKinley, you're recognized.
Well, actually, most of the questions have been, offered already. I am a little concerned that in a very public forum, one of our service providers was just blamed for the death of a human being. And I think that is a very serious allegation. And I think Stephanie's point of highlighting the need for additional training, and perhaps the EMS Council or the fire department, whomever, Dr. Shepke, the team that puts together those protocols can take a look at this. But in effect, that's what you've just done, is blame the death of one of your patients on an ambulance provider. And that's a very serious allegation. And I share my colleagues' concerns that if you've got a patient in that window that was able to pass within the 3-hour time frame, probably a different service provider should have responded to that phone call. That's all.
Thank you for your comments. I can't say if the person would have lived if they got to the other facility immediately. I don't know. They probably would not have. I don't know. And I'm not saying it's their fault that the person died. We did everything we could do for that patient in the ER. I am limited when I don't have all the resources that a tertiary center has. But I think that sometimes I wish there was more opportunity. You call one provider, they aren't able to come for X period of time. There is no other options in the ER for me to call anybody else. Yes, and call 911, but then 911 uses their protocols on where to respond. If I've already spoken to the specialist and the ER and I've gotten everybody, made them aware of the patient I'm taking care of, if 911 comes, they don't necessarily go to the same facility that I've spoken to. They might go to a different facility depending on their protocols.
I've done ride-alongs with 911 and sat in the back of the ambulance and know that when the ER director tells that operator of that truck as they're coming in to go to this hospital, that's where that ambulance goes. But I don't want to get in. Let me end this on a very positive note. I think I get the point that you were trying to make. Perhaps a better example could have been used. But let me end this on a positive note. My son just started EMS training. I'm very proud of him. He's up in North Florida. Would love to see him become a firefighter paramedic after working with Palm Beach County Fire Rescue in high school for 3 years as a cadet. But as his mom, there is sort of this dream that maybe his intelligence levels, he becomes a very successful firefighter paramedic and loves what he does, but gets inspired by somebody like you and ends up going to medical school. So thank you for giving this mom additional reasons to be proud of her son and hopeful.
Excellent.
So thank you for that.
Thank you, my
Thanks for
pleasure.
your service.
Thank you all for your
Thank you,
service.
Doctor. And just as an aside, Madam Administrator, I think one of the issues that were taken away from his testimony is the potential for an ER doctor not to rely fully on the 911 system in the event that there's a dispute between the emergency room doctor and fire rescue about where that patient should go. This is the first I've ever heard of that. I don't know that it's a more than an anecdotal issue in this particular case, but as a policymaker in this county, I can't imagine that we should be tolerating disputes between the on-scene emergency physician and fire rescue units that are not willing to transport an emergent and acute patient to the facility that the doctor has directed him to. And it sounds like that was one of the issues in his story. So I'm talking to Stephanie, I'm talking to Fire Chief and Madam Administrator.
The next person will be Richard. Girsu or Giru, followed by Brent the Hammer.
I'm actually Brent Delhamer. Rich had to go. He's on shift. He's a fellow emergency physician. I'm Brent Delhamer, MD, Assistant Director of Emergency Services at Wellington Regional Medical Center in Wellington, Florida. Thank you very much for having me and hearing our comments today. As an emergency physician, I can say that the men and women standing behind me, I'm familiar with many of them, and I think that they do an outstanding job. I think that the men and women of AMR, including Brooke and Kevin, they've been outstanding partners for me for the last 15 years at Wellington and inside Palm Beach County, and have worked hand in hand with us very successfully. And I think that they are a true asset to patient care in this county. That being said, I think that there have been perhaps opportunities and challenges that have come up over the last several years, perhaps related to volume, perhaps related to technical elements of the provision of secondary transportation services in the county. We've seen their data presented today, and I am a big believer in data, absolutely. I think that we all understand that certainly within any field, and I think within patient care specifically, there are certain things that data doesn't necessarily always convey. I would give you a more maybe pedestrian example. If I have a patient that has received their emergency care and has been discharged from the emergency department, say an elderly patient, and is perhaps suffering from some sort of cognitive dementia or something similar, these patients actually have been shown and proven to do much better if they are returned to places that they're familiar with and in the care of their care teams. A busy emergency department is not necessarily the best place for them. However, if they still need ALS level of care, then our hands are somewhat tied, and we do need to provide that care to transport them safely. I think the timely transport of an ALS level patient is not only the responsibility, of course, of our providers, but also I think a moral directive. And I think that AMR and medics do their best. However, anecdotally speaking, there are many opportunities that come up where our patients are waiting. I think for long periods of time, we are quoted times and then re-quoted times that are several hours later, and then re-quoted times that are several hours later. This is not infrequent, and I don't blame the men and women behind me. I don't know what the cause is. However, I do know that in my experience in other municipalities and other parts of the country, that areas where we had multiple providers for the secondary services, it seemed to be less of an issue.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate
We have one question for you, sir. Commissioner McKinley. All right.
Yeah, thank you. I live behind this hospital. Doctor, I actually met you on one of those fire rescue ride-alongs, so he can tell you that that statement I made was true. But I just want to, not on the COPCN issue, but I want to give some credit to Wellington Regional. This doctor put in place one of the first opioid medication emergency room protocols in our county, and you should be commended for that. And they also help sponsor our sexual assault response center, the Butterfly House, that's housed adjacent to his emergency room. So just want to give you some accolades on the record, and thank you for everything you do for our community.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, sir.
We have Charles Mainan and Neil Schiller. I might have said that wrong. Go ahead, Charles.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Charles Mayman for MCT Express, doing business as All County Ambulance. I had planned a whole different set of comments, but I'm going to take up my time to just address some of the issues that have been brought up. AMR's council, when they stood up, made a comment about our organization and delivery of service on the Treasure Coaster and Hurricane Dorian. That is totally untrue. We were there, we evacuated hospitals and nursing homes. Also, there was a comment made about our company down in Dade County, where we operate under the name of MCT, and our relationship, and I think he said not answering calls in response to Metro-Dade County's 911 requests. That is totally untrue. We've been in place in Dade County for 20-plus years, and our company does an excellent job. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about is this conversation about the 8,500 transports that should have been handled by NEMTS. I will tell you that our organization handles thousands of these requests. We serve 15 Florida counties. And in our dispatch center, when we receive a request for basic life support service, which is the movement of usually a patient from a hospital to a skilled nursing facility or a rehabilitation center, we ask a series of triage questions of the caller. Sometimes the caller is a case manager. Sometimes it's a nurse requesting the service. If you are asking the right questions, you will not be sending the wrong level of service. I'm not saying it never happens, it does. But the 8,500 number says to me the right questions are not being asked of the caller, and that's the responsibility of your private provider. The community, there's conversation about how ambulance transport volume is going down, and there was conversation from one of the AMR representatives about community-based paramedicine and the ET3 program. And while we are recognition of the fact that community-based paramedicine is coming into place and it will play a vital role, that vital role is mainly more on the 911 side. And so requests for service from the private sector for inter-facility transport is continuing to rise in all of the counties that we serve. It is not going in the opposite direction. Lastly, the issue that was discussed with concerning the what ambulance service or what type of service 911 or private sector should be used in an emergent interfacility transport situation, the answer is the private sector should be able to provide the service if they're responding in a timely fashion. Thank you.
Just a quick question. Thank you for your comments here today, and I appreciate that you brought up a small elephant in the room, which was a letter the board received from Indian River County professional firefighters and paramedics with regards to the Category 5 Hurricane Dorian. Do you have any information on that response from?
Yes, sir. That was what I was addressing on the Treasure Coast with Hurricane Dorian.
So what happened there?
So I'll tell you what happened. All County Ambulance is the provider in Indian River County. We were in the process of evacuating Sebastian River Medical Center. and we're doing so, and preparing to evacuate any other skilled nursing facilities or facilities that wanted to evacuate. The state of Florida made a decision to push what I call push the FEMA button. So what happens is the state of Florida makes a call to FEMA. FEMA deploys their assets that are contracted. The contracted assets are American Medical Response. They are the contracted provider to FEMA. We all recognize that AMR is a large national company, and they have that ability, and that's great. So did AMR participate in the Treasure Coast? Yes. After the request by the state of Florida, and I verified after that letter came out, Mayor, with the state of Florida, the Florida Department of Health Division of Emergency Medical Services. I spoke with Ricky Stone, who is the special projects manager there, and Ricky said to me, yes, Charlie, when that occurred, the state of Florida did push the FEMA button, hence that deployed FEMA. And that's exactly what happened. But we were there doing our job.
Okay. And then did you have any concern or response to the Indian River Medical Center's HVAC system failing and the lack of all-county MCT not responding? Can you clarify that? Because I want to give you a fair opportunity to defend.
And I appreciate that, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So the response to that is we were there. It took 72 hours for Indian River Medical Center to get that system repaired. We had units on scene, moving patients, and we're on scene round the clock for 72 hours, and then actually returned some patients to Indian River Medical Center after they chose to send out. So we were there during that whole period of time and did our job. That letter is patently false.
Okay. And then one last question with regards to some other issues that have been brought up. Are you aware of the All-American or Falk Ambulance Company at all?
I'm aware of American Ambulance Service, yes, sir.
Not Falk?
I'm aware of Falk. Falk owned American Ambulance Service.
And what was your relationship to the company?
I was the regional CEO.
And are there multiple CEOs?
There was a U.S. CEO above my head.
And what happened to that? Because they've made application to this county in prior COPCN applications, and I can't get any information on it. It's not terribly relevant, but if there's an identity of interest here, I'd like to know about it.
Certainly, sir. So Falk sold their assets to us in the company to us, All County Ambulance specifically to us in January 15th of this year. The company, American Ambulance never went bankrupt. It was a sale.
But
They were
Falk
sold.
did?
Falk never went bankrupt. American Ambulance never went bankrupt. The organization was sold.
Okay. And so the only company that you're part of now is the one you're representing and speaking on behalf of?
That is correct.
Very good. One more question. Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you. I guess your comment regarding the ability to immediately transport somebody if ER room, would that be your recommendation, is that they call for, if they have somebody that needs to be moved immediately, to call for an interfacility transport, or would it be better served by calling 911?
So, Commissioner, I'm going to answer your question, I'm going to give you a quick, brief glimpse of Broward County. Might be helpful to you. If a patient is a STEMI alert or a trauma patient, the Broward County ordinance requires the hospital to utilize the 911 system. However, there are a very large number, a tremendous, and dream of something else, diagnoses that come up that require immediate ALS transport on an interfacility basis. And your private sector provider should be able to respond to those requests within 15 to 20 minutes with the appropriate level of service. That's what I was referencing. Now, I give you a glimpse of Broward County because we operate in Broward County, and I happen to like their ordinance. I think it's in the public's best interest. So if it's a STEMI alert or a trauma patient, the hospitals by county ordinance are required to utilize the 911 system. If it's anything else other than those two categories, if you review their ordinance, they're utilizing the private sector. But remember that a lot of calls that are not STEMI alert, are not trauma patients, need to be moved quickly. And I think it's important that your private sector be able to provide that response with the appropriate level of service. One of the hallmarks of our organization is our critical care transport program, which we believe would be extremely beneficial here in Palm Beach County.
I'm just curious how you would staff for that level of service. And maybe this isn't the right, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of other discussions about this, but I mean, to be able to staff for an immediate availability within 15 minutes of a hospital.
Correct, Commissioner. So the answer to the question is availability, okay, and always keeping vehicles available to provide those services geographically. If you're a provider in Palm Beach County, and Palm Beach County is the largest county in the state of Florida, if I'm not mistaken, geographically, you need to have assets and resources available. And so to make it simple for this conversation, I would tell you that you need to have ready assets in the north end of the county, in the central portion of the county, and in the southern part of the county that can achieve that 15 or 20-minute response time upon hospital request. And that has to do with how you have your protocol set up in your dispatch center and how you operate your business. Because through all of this, it is a business, and we do have to take care of our patients first and our customers. The patient comes first. The customer is usually a hospital who's dependent upon you to do your job and get there for them. And that's not what's happening in Palm Beach County today.
Wait, further questions, Commissioner Weiss? Commissioner Marino, you're recognized.
Thank you. I have a quick question. You referenced the fact that you do business in Broward, and how many other providers are in Broward also?
There's a total of 5.
Is AMR one of those?
Yes.
Okay. And Miami-Dade, are you familiar with what their providers are?
Yes, there's 5 there also.
Okay, so we're the only county with only one.
Palm Beach County is the only county of its size in the state of Florida that only has one provider, other than a county that has a public utility model, which is Pinellas County. And it's government-run, and the county controls it all, and there is a lot of service there. But the county's in total control of the situation.
And if you were to do anything to make the service in those counties better because you have 5 providers, how would you do that?
There's always room for improvement, Commissioner. If you look at Broward County, I think that service, always comes down to the number of vehicles that are on the road. Okay, I think that it's important for the county to play a role in understanding the staffing patterns of the private sector. That's one of the problems I see in Palm Beach County today. There's no level of understanding what the private sector is provided to require on a daily basis. So understanding your staffing patterns and having those levels of control by the county, I think, are very important.
And this contract would only bring a minimum of 12 trucks, is that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner. We've requested 12 vehicles. The request is not, look, AMR and medics have been in place for a lot of years, and they've done a wonderful job. Take nothing away from them. But the fact of the matter is that the county is growing significantly. We all know that, and during the COVID pandemic, of course, Palm Beach County has seen unprecedented growth. An additional 12 vehicles will do nothing more than help to augment and supplement the assets that are available to the hospitals. And we had the opportunity to speak with case managers and physicians and administration within hospital systems here in Palm Beach County. And patients are waiting hours upon hours. I will tell you that I have been told by hospital systems here that a patient that needs to go to a skilled nursing facility is not receiving service until after midnight because your provider is busy. You need more service. That's all there is to it. And when you stop and look at that, a patient that's going to a rehab or a skilled nursing facility, they were supposed to be picked up at 4 or 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and now it's after midnight and they're being transported, that is not good for the patient at all. A lot of these patients are confused and suffer from cognitive problems, and it's very confusing to the patient, and the families are outraged, and the hospitals hear about it.
Thank you. I have additional questions, but I'll ask them of staff.
All right,
later.
Vice Mayor Weinroth.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. We've heard testimony today that your organization had waived off of calls that were made to you in Broward and either didn't answer the phone or did not accept the calls. Is this something that you can validate, or do you keep statistics as to the number of calls you're receiving and the number that you're not able to respond to?
Commissioner, we respond to all requests for service. I think that was my first 2 comments. I heard one about the Treasure Coast. The mayor specifically asked about Hurricane Dorian. And then the second one I heard was related to our 911 service in Dade County. By the way, just so you understand, both our organization, MCT, and AMR serve Metro Dade Fire Rescue. We both have contracts and agreements with Metro Dade County. So I would tell you that those are totally false, and I'll be happy to provide any data or anything else that you would like to see regarding that matter.
So it's your testimony today that your organization would not have said we can't transport a particular patient or let the phones ring and not take the calls?
That is my testimony, Commissioner, that is patently untrue, if those statements.
Thank you.
All right. Further into public comment.
Any more questions? We have Neil Schiller, followed by Salome Lofty.
Great. Thank you so much, Mayor, Commissioners. Good afternoon. Neil Schiller with the Government Law Group, proudly representing MCT Express, doing business as All County Ambulance. Next slide, please. I have a brief presentation. We're asking that you support staff's recommendation that there is a need for an additional COPCN holders and follow the EMS Council recommendation as well as there to approve All County Ambulance as an additional private provider. This is the data that shows that there's been a 14.3% population growth from 2011 to 2019 in ages 45 to 85, which is the target area of the people that really do use the interfacility service. And I think it's important to note, those numbers don't include the post-COVID boom that we see every day. I know it because what was supposed to be a half-an-hour trip this morning took 50 minutes. All those snowbirds aren't going home anymore. Next slide. The number of facilities has grown substantially, 43%, and not just facilities that use this service. You know that they're growing because every other month you get how many applications for CLFs, ALFs, skilled nursing facilities, micro hospitals. These facilities are growing despite what they are saying in terms of telehealth and telemedicine. And developers are betting big bucks that those facilities are going to grow. Next slide. Your survey data showed you there's an issue. 9 out of 10 hospitals answered that there needs to be more ambulance providers. That's in Stephanie or your staff's original report. 25 of respondents, 43%, said that there needs to be more ambulance providers. Are private ambulance needs being met? 75% answered sometimes or no. Next slide. This is the slide that your staff prepared, which we literally check all of the boxes. We're number 1, all county ambulance, everything, we are fully compliant with the EMS ordinance. Next slide. And the summary report, to me, speaks volumes. We've proposed a supplemental service. Not once have we ever intended to replace AMR and medics. We do not. We intend to ask that you allow 12 additional ambulatory units to be run by All County. Again, next page, and I'm running out of time. The need is there. This county is growing whether we like it or not. People are using interfacility service and fertility service. You don't need an interfacility trip for that. But I would say in closing a couple of things. One, COBRA is supportive of staff's recommendation. And two, we are talking about, there was a lot of discussion about changing the system, making revisions, augmentation. Well, wouldn't it be great to have 2 professional providers in these meetings with your hospitals and with your staff to make this system even better? And again,
Bill,
we
your time has
really
expired.
hope that you support
Just
staff's recommendation.
Very briefly, you mentioned COBRA. Do you have the letter from them so we can make it part of the file?
Yes, it was emailed to everybody, but I could email it to the staff and get it to you so that it's part of the file.
After Salome Lofty will be
Thank you.
Julia DiTallo.
Good morning. My name is Salome Lofty. I'm here on behalf of Century Ambulance. We're here to humbly request your approval for our COPCN application. A little bit of background about who we are. We are a well-established company serving Jacksonville and the surrounding communities for the past 40 years. Through growth, we have continued to expand in the state of Florida, and we are currently dispatching our fleet of ambulances out of 16 operation centers spread across 13 states, including Broward County, which we expanded into in 2018. In an effort to better understand the needs of Palm Beach community, we have been participating in EMS Advisory Council meetings for almost 2 years. Based on general feedback gathered from these meetings, we hold the position that there is a dire need for additional medical transport providers. In particular, we'd like to draw attention to question 4 of the survey, wherein the participants were asked a simple question: do you feel that your needs are being adequately met by the existing provider? Only 46% of the respondents said that they felt that their needs are being met, which clearly indicates that there's a need for additional providers in the county. We at Century want to serve your community. For us, patients are our number 1 priority. We are especially proud of the fact that our level of service, commitment, and professionalism has earned us recognition by the Broward County Fire Chiefs Association as Provider of the Year 3 years in a row. We would be honored if you would consider our COPCN application and grant us the opportunity to provide this level of service to your community. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have 2 more public speakers, and then we will take a 5-minute break for necessary reasons.
Salome, I have a quick question.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Weiss and then Commissioner Bernard.
Thank you. Actually, this is for Mr. Schiller. Could you print out a copy of that letter? I don't think we have a copy of it, so it can be entered in the record. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Weiss. Commissioner Bernard.
Just a question. So you're on behalf of Century Ambulance Services?
That's correct.
Are you doing services in Broward?
Yes, that's correct. And we're the Provider of the Year 3 years in a row.
And so you're one of the 5 in Broward County?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Very good. 2 more public speakers, and we're delighted to have Julie. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Marino.
Yes.
Our ordinance here is in place for 6 years. Do you know what the Broward ordinance is, lengthwise?
5 years.
5 years, okay, thank you.
That's our general manager, sorry. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any more questions. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you for your time.
And we have the CEO of CareerSource here today. We're delighted to have you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor. I came in this morning actually to do a presentation for CareerSource, but coming in here and seeing all these men and women in uniform from AMR, I just wanted to comment that we too have an excellent working relationship with AMR, specifically in the career pathway for our youth coming out of high schools and our colleges starting off with ambulance driver, moving on to EMT, then paramedic, and hoping to bridge that to the firefighters. So I just wanted to say a big shout out to the company and to support them today. I know that you're talking about much more serious matters, but we do enjoy a working relationship with AMR, and we hope that whoever you choose and the additional companies you might choose also has that working relationship with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then our final public speaker.
Will be Ellen Bogdanoff.
Senator.
Thank you, Commissioners, Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity. I just wanted to correct a couple of things that were stated on the record. Miami-Dade County does not require audited financial statements. Broward was thinking about it, and they backed off because they recognized that it really was no indicator of quality service. I represent National Health Transport, and the only thing that we didn't have at the time of the application was the audited financial statements, which we do actually as of today. And part of the problem is I'm sure you all can appreciate that it is a very costly and time-consuming process to get audited financial statements. By the time we realized that Palm Beach County was going to be a real opportunity, because it hasn't been for many years, we began the process, and it took some time. But as I stand here today, we have audited financial statements, which means we check every single box. One of the things I also wanted to mention is, in terms of all of the issues that were brought up, we have a built-in education system in Miami-Dade County, Broward County. We also are in Martin County, but we're not in Palm Beach County. But we have a built-in education system where what happens in Miami-Dade and Broward doesn't necessarily happen, where you're going to have like 8,700 or 8,500 calls, where it should be maybe just somebody calling a cab versus calling a non-emergency transport. And we work alongside the companies that are here today in Broward and Miami-Dade County, and it works well. And they don't seem to have the same concerns or the level of, I would say, not complaints, but concerns that the timing is not always working for patients. We did a significant amount of work in Palm Beach County, talked to a lot of the facilities, including the hospitals, to find that there was actually a significant need. And I think competition's a good thing, and I think it's going to make all of the non-emergency transport providers better. It seems that with 3 qualified, to pick just one would be arbitrary. And we are asking you to consider the fact that we needed time to produce those audited financial statements. The other communities didn't have them, and it usually keeps out smaller regional providers, which we are. We're clearly not as big as AMR, but would like the opportunity to serve Palm Beach County. We did so during COVID, and hope you will consider bringing in all 3. It works in the other counties, and they don't seem to have a problem, and it's not confusing. They build a relationship with the providers in the hospitals. They make the phone calls, and the service is there. And if one can't do it, then the other one does it. And we enjoy a good working relationship with all of the providers, and hope you will consider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So we will take a 10-minute recess, and then we'll return promptly at 12:25 for further deliberation. We're in recess.